Though this isn't a formal board meeting, this is a workshop, so I don't have to open.
Are we reopen at 5?
We'll open at 5 in our regular. Hmm? No, I just verified it, thank you. Oh. All right. Okay, so we are here this afternoon to discuss one more time the school start time, right? So I am going to actually ask the board, because I know that several wanted to speak about this again, and then there was 2 that did not. So, I mean, it is what it is. So, but we're here just to make sure that we, as a board, look at all options and make sure that we're doing what our district feels is necessary. Okay? So with that, Charles, I know that you came up with a document that you shared with us. Would you like to share some of those points?
Sure. All right. Thank you all for joining us, and to a large extent, thank you for humoring me, because the reason I personally wanted to have this discussion again with people who know what's going on, on the ground, so to speak, is that I don't think we paid the proper attention to the crux of the matter, or the reason why the AAP said, hey, school time should start later, right? So the crux of the matter is insufficient sleep, right? With the survey results, one thing I was shocked about is that students reported a lot less time per night doing homework than I would have expected, just from what I've heard, just from being on the board a few years, right? And but we do know that there's a lot of other things that are going on, in their worlds, extracurriculars, so forth and so on. So, do you see the, I guess, the effects of insufficient sleep, specifically in your high school students, right? And then, okay, that's the crux of the matter. And then the reason is that as kids get older and at high school age, their bodies shut down later, and so the AEP says it's better that they start their days later, right? So we haven't had a discussion about that. We had a discussion about everything around starting school later, right? I understand clearly that older kids won't be home in time with using the options that we presented. Older kids wouldn't be home in time to get the younger kids. There were teachers that would have to go out and find childcare that don't have to do that right now. There would have to be all kinds of things going on with game scheduling and extracurriculars and so forth and so on. So we talked about all of that, but we didn't perhaps talk about the students, right, and like their bodies and what their needs are. So that's kind of where I want to focus the conversation, because we're clear about everything else, but that's what I want to talk about. Just see what you're seeing.
Charles.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go along with you, along with a few other points, but, and one of my points is the reason why we went to an earlier school start time. And that's all based off of the bus system, and it's all based off of, it was money driven to help save on a lot of school districts' budgets if they went through it from a 2-tier bus system to a 3-tier bus system to help save on budgets. And they started school start times at 7 o'clock. I'm here at 7:15. Because I distinctly remember when that happened. I was in high school. It happened after I got out of high school, but I remember when I was in high school, I went to school from 8 to 3. And, I'm not going to say that was the best time or the worst time. I was going to say that was our school start time, and it was in this area. So, and then when they moved back to, I think I was teaching at the time when they moved from the 2-tier bus system to the 3-tier to save money for all districts. And it was pretty much around the United States that they went to that. So just to clarify, that's the reason why a lot of high school start times used to start at so early in the morning, at 7:15 in the morning. So that's to know the history, and if you want to change something, you have to know the history why it's put in place.
So you're
And let me
saying
go-
that, you're saying that it changed, sorry, Charles.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
You're saying that it changed just because of
Strictly money,
money.
Very reason.
monetary reasons.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely 100%. And you ask anybody and they'll tell you the same thing.
And so I was going to follow up with, like, where am I trying to go with this? And if we can discuss and say, yeah, there's something that we should do here, right, to kind of mold the time of the school day to what's best for our students health-wise, then I'm of the opinion that on a situation like this, it doesn't need to be, there's got to be significant buy-in from all the stakeholders, right? So if we take a 4-3, even a 5-2 vote up here, right? But, you know, our people who are in it every day really don't buy into the solution, I don't think that's going to get us anywhere, right? So again, that's why I want to thank you for your time and your insight. And so if we can figure out, if we can say, yeah, okay, we should do something, then the next part of the discussion is, all right, what works? You know, and then we can't ignore what the stakeholders told us that responded to the survey earlier this year. The two options that we had, I think, should be off the table, right? Because they were fairly unpopular. They were unpopular. So, you know, so there's some. That's the final goal.
So what you're saying, just to clarify, so you're saying throw out everything that was put on the survey, and just throw it out, and let's just say, look, is it important for us as a school district to look at our school start times for a certain age group of kids? And if we're all in agreement that yes, that is important for us later start times, then let's look at what that looks, take a step further. If we all agree on that, then let's look at it a step further and say, now what does that look like within our system that we have right now? And can we tweak that a little bit? Is that what, okay.
So I'll speak and I'll give my opinion. First of all, I don't disagree as a parent who has a high school child that longer sleep time, later sleep time, you know, he goes to bed at the same time, is better for his health. Okay. My problem is that, you know, again, we come back to this discussion and we drag, you know, staff back in here, and you mentioned that we want to talk about, you know, the behaviors of the child. I find it difficult to ask the principals to stand up in front of us and give us a thought on, you know, different grade levels, child's behaviors, because they have no idea what's going on at home. They don't. I'm not sure that they know in every classroom if half the kids are half awake at 7 o'clock or not at 7 o'clock. And I believe that, you know, our job as trustees is to govern the district and do what's best for our district as a whole, right? Financially, if it's a school start time. And I'm okay with that. The problem I have is the ongoing discussion is that we've brought them in once and not a single principal that spoke in front of us was in favor. We sent the time and money and put a survey out there to parents. 60, 70, whatever the percentage was not in favor. But we don't like the survey now because it wasn't really what was good for us. So again, I don't dispute that we need longer sleep time or kids need more help. The medical thing that you guys have in front of you that say that. My problem is that we're having this discussion again, and we still have no solution to or recommendation from either administration or from other board members of how we should solve this solution. So we can spend the next hour and a half talking about, is it better for our kids? Is it better for them to be well rested? How do we fix the problem with, you know, practice in the morning or practice in the afternoon? But at the end, there's got to be some solution or some recommendation. Otherwise, again, we're just talking about this ongoing topic for an hour and a half or 2 hours or however long we do this workshop. And I just want to be respectful of our staff time, again, bringing them in. But I don't think the solution is asking them about sleep patterns or whether they feel like their students at the high school are well rested or not well rested.
Okay. Well, we're here, and we're gonna have a conversation. So let's kind of dive into it. I would love to hear some input, and I don't think this is gonna be close to an hour and a half. So yes, sir. I'm sorry, I'm not.
No, I
Yeah.
No, you know
Yeah,
what?
come
I
on up.
really wish that.
I wish, yeah, we had
Can
a
can
table.
bring
but-
chairs
Hey, why
up?
don't
Can
y'all-
I
yeah,
mean,
why
this is
don't
not
y'all-
like this formal board meeting. This is a discussion.
Matter of fact, we can go out there. Come on.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Video for
we're on-
everything.
that's why we're out here.
Yeah, come on up. Oh, look, I can even put my screen down so I can see. Oh, yeah.
Be like old times. We just gotta try not to get in trouble.
Want to join? Come on. Are you sure? Absolutely. Dawson, you just want to sit back?
Just observing.
Come on, Mr. Wells. Okay. But I might need your opinion. Then you'll come up here and give it to me then? Thank you, appreciate it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, you can push it down, like, because I couldn't see Crystal at all.
So I guess my observations in response to your question, Mr. Gooden, about what we see with students is it is kind of hard to say, because I think freshmen are in a different boat than seniors. At least on our campus, I would say that about 80 to 90% of our seniors have accrued enough credits that by the time they get to be in their senior year, they can get the release time. And so seniors, by overwhelming margin, do not report to school at 7:15. They're coming typically, at least on our campus, because of the block scheduling, at about 8:30, 8:45 or so. So seniors, I would say I'm not concerned about sleep patterns or whatever for them. Freshmen are in a different boat, because currently, when they come from the junior high and they're reporting school at 8:45, and then all of a sudden they're coming at 7:15, there is an adjustment period for them. Absolutely. And so that is something that every one of our freshmen, go through. I would say that typically the students in high school that I have noticed that have most time constrictions are usually in the junior year. That's when they're taking the difficult AP classes and the dual credit classes, and if they're in, that's the year that they're getting ready to go to college. And so I think that the most pressure cooker class for high school students is in the junior year. When I speak to parents that are concerned about sleep time and those sorts of things, a lot of our conversation has very little to do with start times, actually, and has much more to do with concerns over addiction to video games or addiction to social media use. And so the parents that I'm speaking to are seeking outside counseling and those sorts of things having to do with the addictions. And so I cannot say one way or the other if start time plays into that, because we don't know if we move the school day back 2 hours, are they just going to move back the time that they fall asleep by there? But to me, those conversations have much more to do with a mental health kind of a thing and an addiction that they believe that the students have developed.
You said social media and what was the other
In
one?
video games.
Video games.
So it's screen time.
Yeah, but you know what? I've had those same discussions with parents, but as a district, I can't control your household. I can't control when a child goes to sleep. However, I can control when he wakes up or she wakes up. And if it's that last 45 minutes of sleep, which is the most quality sleep that most humans will get, if it's that last 45 minutes that I can get, some people tell me, well, Hank, what's the difference between starting at 7:15 and 8 o'clock? I said 45 minutes. And if that 45 minutes is the greatest sleep that they're going to get, well, then, so be it. And so, that's where that's my push. I would be honest, I'm the one that started this whole deal way back three years ago, on this push. And so, just to get closer to what they're asking for us. And so, I just want to, us to give it its due diligence because
Sure.
we're talking about kids here. And guys, I was just at a conference this past weekend, and if you think it's getting better in the United States with our kids, you're absolutely positively wrong. And I'm telling you, the numbers are staggering. The numbers are staggering about how much pressure is on these kids at a school age group when it comes to the age of 11. The spike in suicide rates from girls between the ages of 11 to 13 is skyrocketing.
In all demographics, I agree with it. Yeah.
Lance, let me ask you a question. And just again, I'm just asking. So you make a statement, and you always make the statement that we don't control the parenting in the household, and I agree 100%. What goes on in your own house and how you parent your kids varies from house to house in all of our different schools, and we hear that as we go out and visit with teachers at our luncheons and things like that. But who's to say that we push the start time back to 8 and those kids don't stay up till 11 instead of 10?
Was that's part of what the
And so I
survey
mean that's
addresses.
I mean that's I just want to put that
No, but Sean, I hear what you're saying. So let's say one kid goes to bed at 10 and one kid goes to bed at 11, right? Fair enough, right? We push the start time back to 8 o'clock as opposed to 7:15. Both kids are still getting 45 extra minutes if you just talk about basic time, right? Regardless if they
what
get.
stops that kid from staying up till midnight?
Well, I don't.
Exactly.
I can't control
Right.
that. I can control if we push it back 45 minutes that I am guaranteeing if we push back the start time at 8 o'clock, and let's say that they get to school, they wake up 10 minutes before school and they drive to school and they're a junior and they get there right as school starts, I'm guaranteeing that they're getting possibly a chance to get 45 more minutes of sleep.
May I say that both of you are right? So the studies show that you move times back, there are some kids that get more sleep, and then you're completely out of control about what happens in somebody's house, right? So we cannot guarantee that everybody gets more sleep. But what I don't want to do with this discussion and what we did last time around is that we didn't give everybody a chance to speak. So everybody who came didn't get a chance to get their input, and I want to, if we don't mind, switching back
Absolutely.
So I appreciate what you're saying about social media and video games.
Well, that's part
You
of
know,
the reason
that's-
why they're staying up late.
Right. So, I mean, especially
Which is
like,
out of our control.
are high school students playing Fortnite, or is it just the younger ones?
No, everybody.
Everybody's playing Fortnite.
Yeah.
Is that right?
What is the other
We
Oh, yes.
we had to get rid of Fortnite at the house. There's no more Fortnite, right? It's just anyway. Say it again.
Sorry. For parents know that, sometimes play these games with their kids like I used to do. Things happen at a certain time. The games are social. The social network is social. There's a certain time when they start. There's a certain time when roughly they end.
Mm-hmm.
So if you change the start time and you make it later, they probably are going to get a little more sleep because they're going to end at the same time regardless.
Yeah.
Now, maybe not every kid,
Yeah.
but a lot of them.
Yeah.
If that's what they're doing, then it would make a difference.
Yeah.
Of course, I can speak on high school all day, but I'm going to make kind of something I noticed this year for the first time. At the high school level, I see kids in the morning. They're a little tired in the morning when they get up. By the time that bell rings at 7:10, they're running to class and off and going. I'm sure they're tired. I'm not going to sit up here and say kids are not tired at 7:10 in the morning. At the high school level, unless they ride a bus, they're getting to school right about 7:05. I mean, maybe 7:10. It depends on how quick they can get in the building. Sometimes 7:25 with a Chick-fil-A bag. But it just depends on the day. But what I did notice, and I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about as far as pushing everybody back 30 minutes or
We don't know.
flipping. Yeah, so it's hard to really address each concern. But I, for the first time this year, took some of my students over to the elementary school to do kind of a rah-rah in the morning with the football team. And we asked the principals, what time should we be here? And they said, 7:15. And I'm like, why would you be here at 7:15 in the morning? Well, kids get dropped off at 7:15. School doesn't start till 8. So we ride our bus over there. We get there, and at 7:10, there are already parents waiting for elementary kids to drop off to go to work, I'm assuming, because they're all dressed for work. So let's just assume that we move the start time back. And I'm not even going to defend high school for a minute. I'm just going to talk about elementary and what I saw. Their parents still have to go to work. Those little kids are still getting up. You push start time back 30 minutes for those elementary kids, they still have to get up at the same time. Now, a high school kid that drives could benefit from a few more hours of sleep, but a parent who's got to drop their kids off and be at work at 8, they're getting them up no matter what. So start time pushing back for the younger kids. And for the first time, I mean, at my school at 7:15, kids are still pulling in the parking lot. 7:20, they're still pulling in the parking lot. At 7:50, I was like, where are all the kids? Oh, they're in the school. And I'm like, what do you mean they're already here? And they're all on time in the building. And by 8 o'clock, the bell rings. There's not a car in the front of the school. They've all dropped them off early. And what I learned from that is that parents are going to get those little ones up early, no matter what time you start elementary school. They're going to drop them off at 7:15. So I think that this is just a hard question to answer because, yes, I think some high school kids might sleep a little later. Some are still going to get up, go to Chick-fil-A, meet with their friends, do all that stuff before school, and they're going to rush to school because most of my kids that drive do not get up at 5:30 in the morning. They get up just a few minutes before they have to get in their car to come to school. But an elementary kid really is determined by what time their parents have to go to work, whether they're dropped off at daycare or whether they're dropped off at the school. It's still going to be the same time because parents don't go to work any later. So.
Not at school at that time, instead of parents bringing them, those high school kids are going to be woke up to get those youngers ready and bring them. I mean, we still have some kids that do that, but we have so many of them in the afternoon that do pick them up, and they are the caregivers. So again, they can't do it in the morning if they're at school, but if they're not at school, those parents are going to wake them up, and they're going to have them do that. And I'll just kudos to her because that's exactly, if looking at elementary, if you don't leave the time the same, she's absolutely 100% right. Right now, I went to school this morning and I was there at 6:30. I can tell you at 10 minutes till 7, the line starts to drop kids off. At 7:15, if I'm not standing there, they're already piled in the breezeway because parents do have to leave. And we are their safe haven. That's the safest place they have. If they don't have that and they had to push back later, those kids are going to be sitting out there and they don't have. And I'm not speaking from an educator, but speaking from a grandmother's point of view. I have a granddaughter who is in middle school. She started middle school this year and she goes to the GT Academy. And she had to learn the code for the house. They had to buy her a cell phone. And she sits out in the morning and she waits for a bus, not even the Jameson bus that the neighborhood does. She sits out by herself on her phone waiting for a bus to pick her up in the morning. And that's if it would show up in the morning. Very young, very naive young lady, but again, still having to wait because her parents have to be at work. So again, if elementary had to do that, I guarantee you, your high school kids would be responsible for taking care of a lot of those kids. And if you try to push them earlier, she's exactly right. Those kids are already, at 3 o'clock, our kids are done. They're shot. And so we're trying to give them extra time in the afternoon. We wouldn't have it, academically wouldn't have it. As far as behavior for kiddos, if they don't get that sleep, elementary is just as much grumpy, non-focused. They are not there. Behaviors are out of control. And that right now that's happening. And if they have to get up earlier and have less sleep at an elementary level, I can't see it happening.
And that's one of the things we figured out from the survey that didn't work, right? What if you flip high school and elementary school, then you have your elementary school kids on the bus when it's dark and early and all that kind of good stuff. So no, we know that's not we're not, I personally am not even thinking about that option anymore, right? Like I said, everything that we proposed was pretty much, it didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work.
Even talking about pushing them later,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it worse. Actually, would be worse on elementary to have them going later to school because of exactly what Kelly said. Those parents are your transportation. Most of your families are working families. They have to be at work 8 to 5, basically, is their job. Pushing them later, elementary, at the later time, then there is no one. They're going to still drop those kids off early. And you have teachers and staff at an elementary, like Kelly said, at an elementary school, You have to have staff there that's on duty. You're looking at 3-year-olds to 10-year-olds, and you have to have staff. And we open 45 minutes beforehand. Parents are dropping off 45 minutes ahead of time. We also, in dismissal, you have to be there to put those kids in those cars. So you're looking at staff still having to work another 30. We dismiss right now at 3:15. We do not get, the last kids are not gone from our school until after 3:45. So if we pushed it later, and let's just say till 4:15, it's going to be close to 5 o'clock before our kids would even be gone from school as well. So it's still either way you did, if you had them early or you had them later, is going to throw them totally off, and it will throw your parents, transportation-wise, totally off as well.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to high school.
Yeah. So, Mr. Palumbo, oh, I'm sorry, Doctor. Can I call you Dr. Vaughn yet, or is that
Not yet.
not yet? Okay, all right.
Just to kind of follow up with what some of them had to say, I'm speaking from the middle school, junior high perspective. If we were to, there's several scenarios that we've talked about. If we were to have our age group flip-flop with the high school, I think from reading the articles that were shared with us all, it talks about kids being from the age of, I think, 12 to high school kids. Those are our junior high and some of our middle school kids. So who's to choose, which age group that we focus on, if that is the category that we're looking at. Another concern is if we do get the earlier start time, that is still going to play a problem with our kids still needing to be there early because they are not drivers yet. The parents still have to drop them early. Right now, our school starts at 8:35. Our doors open at 7:30, so there's already an hour there that kids are already being dropped off in the morning. There has to be supervision for this age group as well, and we have to monitor what they're doing. Now, if we were to let this age group get out earlier at that 2:15 time, that's a concern because a lot of these kids will be at home by themselves for that amount of time. Most parents don't get off till 5 coming home from the Houston traffic. They probably wouldn't get home till 6. That's 4 hours that these impressionable kids are home alone. And we all can use our imagination to think of some of the things that could happen during that time. So that's a huge concern of ours as well. Although, particularly at my campus, we're located on 1128, so there's not many places for our kids to walk to after school. But other campuses that are located near businesses, that's where those kids are going to go. They're going to hang out at the Burger Kings, at the corner stores, at the Shipley's Donuts, things like that. So that becomes another nuisance that we have to address as well. So that's just something that I definitely think you all need to think about. I know we've talked about athletics and we've talked about all of those different things, but when you want to talk about the child, I think it's important to focus on those things as well.
I guess I'm a little confused because we keep referencing back that last survey, like flip-flopping. That's, for me, I just wanted to know this kind of discussion is it important for kids that I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what the bus times look like. I don't know. And if it's a discussion that we need to have, whereas, yes, we need to make something work that fits everybody's schedule, but we need to push the times back somehow to make it fit for everybody. That's kind of that's what I thought our discussion was going to be about.
And I'm hearing everybody say, I'm hearing everybody answer your question with, yes, it's concerning, and any solution that we can possibly think of within our scope affects the student body that we have in front of us, and we're concerned about that student body. So I'm hearing both things. I'm hearing, yeah, I validate everything this APA article says, and would it be ideal if we were in a magic world and we could start everybody at the same time? Game on. But I'm also hearing that with those concerns, it's kind of a cost-benefit ratio is what I'm hearing each person talk about. I don't know how much benefit we're going to get from our student body individually, and I appreciate what each person is saying because they're being an advocate role for that body alone. And so it's hard for them to think about the next age group. Where it's our job to kind of encompass, I think, all of those pieces of information. And I hear what they're saying in that they can't envision us finding a creative enough opportunity that's going to not affect each individual group adversely, right? I don't know if I'm speaking for someone out of turn, but that's what I'm hearing.
I don't know if this is of interest, but we also have Raul here, and he's researched those questions that Lance brought up about bus times and.
Dr. Allen, you should pull up a chair too, man.
Who's that?
Come on, yeah.
Eric,
Come on, man.
come on up, Raul.
Come on.
Oh, the sarcasm.
Well, I guess we were bringing Mr. Palumbo. Did you? What was your thoughts? And being the,
I think the only solution is a 2-bus run. Honestly, I don't see another solution without there having a domino effect on some other campus, or putting an undue burden on our community and our families.
Right.
So I think that's really the only thing that we can viably have a conversation about, and that's a financial thing that we've got to look into and research with regards to that, because I don't know. I think some of the driving force of this is the mental health, because we've had a lot of discussion about that and that kind of thing. Flipping times is not going to help that, because even right now, I'm going to speak but I've talked to some of our colleagues at the lower levels at junior high, middle school. They're seeing an influx of mental health issues right now, and they're already starting later. So is that truly the solution? I mean, can we find that and help our kids a little bit with it? Yes, but I don't know that if we're not looking at, and financially as a district able to do 2-bus run, I don't know what other solution there truly is, because for us, and I'll speak for Pearland High School, with our extracurriculars, we needed to be on one end or the other due to daylight. So we either need to be early or we need to be later in the day so that we can get the practices going and those types of things and have enough time, especially in the morning. The issue we would run into in the morning practices is allowing our kids to have time to not only shower but eat breakfast, because typically they're not going to get up that early to eat. And then if we're practicing in the morning, they're probably going to be getting at school at 5:30 or 5:45. And is that we have some groups that are doing that right now, but we have very few groups. We would have a substantial shift with that. And so now we're impacting our most active kids with that. And so that's something I think we need to really think through, because we're talking about wanting to get our kids more sleep, but our kids that are most active and typically are the most engaged in the higher level classes as well, so they have a heavier dose of homework and things of that nature. Would we be adversely affecting those kids when we're trying to help kids overall? And so those are some things that I think we just need to really, truly weigh and look at.
Actually, that's a very good point you made as far as, and I know that you could speak to this, Dr. Allen, is that we are seeing the mental health issues even at our junior highs and middle schools. And I know, because that's, my profession, we deal with that a lot too. So when we're looking, and if that's the driving force, which I think that was actually the force that was really sitting on my heart, like, is this something, if we did this, would this help? But because because we have kids that are starting later, and that age group, we're starting to see these things. That's where I'm actually leaning like, that's not the solution.
I don't know that I think if we look at this as the sole solution for mental health problems across our district,
we can't.
Then I think that's an erroneous
missing the point.
thought.
Right.
Because we're only looking at a single component. Just as a single component doesn't cause a mental health issue,
right,
a single component is not going to fix it.
No.
So we got to look at the data that tells us nationally across the board that this is an indicator for at least chipping away at that effort. Mm-hmm. Not that it's going to be an end-all, be-all solution. So if we're thinking of it as that, if we make any changes, we're going to be disillusioned and disheartened after this change is made, based on, the fact that we don't have enough. It will not affect in the ways that we'll be able to measure it.
Right.
And that's the other part for me. I come from a very, very data-driven background, is I don't feel like we have a very clear picture of the problem that we're trying to solve.
I agree.
We're pulling this data from a place of what it looks like nationally, but comparatively to all measures, Pearland is different. We do things different. We respond different. Our kids achieve despite many odds that they're faced with. And so I feel like as we come at this problem, unless we're able to quantify it and figure out what the problem is, then we're just throwing paint at a wall and hoping things stick. And I feel like there's all kinds of data to bolster this idea. And initially, I am very gung-ho about anything that's going to chip away at mental health issues. That's my heart.
too.
That's
I know.
where I'm at.
Where we see eye to eye.
But logistically, I just don't know that what we're hoping the end result will be, the cost-benefit ratio. I don't know that we're going to see the benefit for all the costs that we're imparting.
And I'm not looking for a panacea, right? I'm looking for just aligning what we do with what's
Best
good for
practice,
our kids, right?
yes.
And yeah, best practices. So, Mr. Palumbo, you hit where I was about to go. All right, we know that we have systematic constraints, right? So, in order to, well, one thing we could do is you move the day back 45 minutes, and then that's super late, right? So you've got, I don't know, you got middle school starting at like 9:30, right? And so that's, you know, that doesn't seem.
You mean
very
across the board? Is that
attractive.
what you're referring
Right. I'm talking
Yeah.
about just if you move the
every
whole
every
day back.
every day,
Right.
every campus,
every level
45
you
minutes
move it
later.
because that keeps us within the constraint of we got 3 bus tiers, and each tier needs 45 minutes between each one. You know, kids have to have time for breakfast and so forth and so on, right? So that in our current constraints we can do that, right? But that doesn't seem very. So the one thing is, how do we eliminate one of those constraints and run 2 buses, right? And so we're talking $100,000 a bus to flatten that tiers,
How
about $1 million.
$8 million.
$8 million. And then you got to find drivers.
Yes, 53 more drivers when we're already short 13 this year.
Okay.
How many more drivers?
And when you go to a 2-tier system, you'll probably end up losing half our drivers because they get 6 hours guarantee. Now they get a 4-hour guarantee.
Okay. Okay. And so that 4-hour guarantee, how does that compare with the guarantees that are around us? I know we're going to be talking about increasing our wage now.
Right, every
Most school districts, it's 4 hours, right?
4 hours to 5.5 hours.
4 to 5.5 hours guarantee.
We're the only
Yes.
6 hour.
We're the only
Okay.
6 hours.
And a bus driver per year makes somewhat, let's just say
35,000,
35.
$16 an hour, right?
Yeah, that's you do the average.
Okay.
About average. Yeah.
And we would have 53 more, and then we have how many now?
Right now we have
We have
125, and we're 13 short
13
right
short.
now.
So we're talking about 178 drivers to make that run, right? Okay, $6 million a year. Okay, I don't know. What if I can get you the money?
Can you give me the drivers?
If I can get you the drivers and the money and the gas.
Like I
and-
said, this year we're 13 drivers
yeah,
short.
I know. That's the. I'm not concerned about buying the buses. I'm concerned about the people to move them. And I realize that that's a huge thing to ask. You know, when you're already, like you said, 13 short. But I mean, I don't think that $8 million stands in the way of this happening. You know, $8 million for the buses, that is. 6.2 and
Recurring costs.
that recurring cost for staff?
It's recurring,
Yes, every year
recurring
you
cost.
got maintenance on it.
the $8 million is just initially the
It's
buses.
initial one time.
And we're talking about a total of, well, for the whole,
What's
that's the whole
maintenance
fleet
then?
of drivers,
What do you look at
6.2.
So after the first year, it'd be an additional $3 million
Every year.
every
Recurring
year.
cost. On top of payroll costs.
On payroll, yes,
On top of payroll costs or inclusive of payroll
that'd
costs?
be additional what we have now. Another $3 million on top of that.
But inclusive of payroll costs?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're looking at $9 million every year.
No, I don't know what the
No.
basis of our budget is right now for transportation. You said 6 is,
Our
about
budget
how
right
much?
now, this year, we just finished, is like $7 million.
okay, so about 10 million a year for transportation.
On a recurring basis and then plus the 9. Okay.
So I have a question about Friendswood.
And I'm asking this because I'm not entirely sure of what their setup is, but I know that they start quite considerably later than we do, right? And I know their high school gets out at 3:45. I also know that they have a lot less students in that district, right?
And a lot
I think
less
a third,
schools.
maybe. of
I
what
think
we
around
have.
6,000 students.
Yeah.
They have one junior high, one high school.
And they still have, but they have 3 shifts, right? 3 bus
Two.
shifts? They have
Two.
2? That's my question.
Mr. Cruz, now that you have the microphone, is there any time, for instance, what's our largest group, and during our 3-tier system, what's our largest group of kids that we
Would
move?
be your junior high and middle school.
Junior high, middle school, and they're running at the buses are running at the same time, right?
Correct.
And when you compare the junior high and middle school, that group together, what's the comparison when you take that amount of kids? And I'm not going to ask you how many of the kids that is. You may know because you're that smart, but whatever the kids you're running through, how does that compare to elementary? Like what percentage is it, 2 to 1, or if there's 5,000 kids in that group, is it 2,500 in the elementary? And I don't know, or vice versa, high school.
Our third tier run is our pack. They're running about 58, 60 kids on each bus right now. Our elementaries are not. They're running probably 48 to 50 kids on a bus. High school is your really, really low. You probably average about maybe 45 to a bus.
Okay, so my question is, why is the standard between bus runs, can there be any time gained between bus runs, between 40, like a hybrid? For instance, it's a standard 45, right? Can there be any time gained where there's less time between bus runs? Because I have seen districts that have done that.
Right. This year, the middle school and junior high changed their times. I believe last year they took it off the front end. So we're running 30 minutes for the junior high and middle school, and we're running late almost every day to get to the schools in the afternoon because they cut us the 15 minutes that we need.
You know, that reminds me of another thing, that part of the problem is somewhat of a state problem that the board is aware of. The recent rules that came out that basically judged the length of the year required was changed to minutes. And of course, our desire, like most school districts, is to start somewhere around mid-August. And this board in particular, a lot of people would like to see it end before Memorial Day. So the net effect of that over the last 2 years has been to add some minutes to the day. And so that further complicates things. And Raul, in particular, at the middle school and junior high level, has had a hard time getting to the school on time.
That's correct.
Accurate? Oh yeah, well that's a testing. Yeah, that's another issue completely. That the testing is that it looks like this next year.
Yeah, next calendar year.
Yeah.
About that.
One suggestion that was looked at, which is really a difficult one because it, again, talks a lot about finances. If for every 15 minutes we add to the day, we'll take away from the day. Make the day shorter, start 15 minutes later, but end at the same time, that's 6 more days we have to add to the calendar. So you're talking, if you wanted to start 30 minutes later at every level, but keep the ending time the same, we would have to add 12 calendars to the day. Teachers would have to work 12 extra days. All of the staff work 12 extra days. We would be going into June, like mid-June. So again, we've looked at lots of things to kind of look at the time.
And after doing a bit of research on this, this is a national issue. This is not just local. This is not a new idea that we've come up with. There was an article out of the Boston Globe, I think, that an MIT group actually looked at bus routes and configuring them so that we could put elementary, middle school, and high school in the same bus and re-flipping bus routes on their head. And even then, the board in that instance got egg on their face because it didn't work effectively. So it's not as if there's an easy solution. And I appreciate what you're saying, Charles, in that regard, because what I hear you saying is, you're saying, is any effort to help our kids worth it? I think is what I hear you saying.
Well, yeah. Yes, ma'am. No. Go ahead.
I remember.
Middle schools together with junior highs, and the discipline problems were humongous.
No, I remember you were there when I was in junior high. Yeah.
You were one of
He
them.
was a frequent flyer on that problem.
He was in somebody's office every day.
I guess right. Okay, so that constraint doesn't. Trying to eliminate that constraint is, again, whatever we do is going to have a cost benefit, right? So, I mean, I don't hear anybody saying that I'm against, a later time, or I don't think that, we're validating the science, right? It's just to figure out how we get there. So, trying to remove that constraint with, flattening the tiers, that obviously there's some work to do. And then on top of what we've already talked about, you'd probably have to buy more buses because now we, depending on whether or not we can afford it, have to buy buses with seatbelts, right? So you further, constrict your carrying capacity on the buses, right?
Instead of putting 58, we'll end up putting 46.
46 on
Especially
each
the third
bus?
tier and high school.
All right.
But I think I agree with Crystal, and she makes a point which hits home with me, is how do you quantify what the end result is? And as a board, like anything else, you got to have a goal or an end result of what are we trying to accomplish here, right? What is it that we are trying to accomplish? And then I think there's a fine line as we sit here, 7 board members, to look at how we govern the district. And you take what the feedback from our folks here are saying, what Dr. Kelly is saying, and you look at from a $8 million standpoint of the financial, when we're as a board supposed to be financially responsible and those kind of things. And you have to, being a board member or a trustee has to come into play where you have to do what's in the best interest of the district, right? Because we all want to do what's in the best interest of the students and the teachers and their time and making sure their mental health and well-being. And I just think we need to make a good decision based upon, the recommendations of what they're saying, as well as if we are going to really look at this, hard. Again, this being the second time we've looked at this, what is the end result that we're trying to achieve? And if we can't, if we don't know what that end result is, then we can have these discussions and we can continue to go around and talk about the impact. But
and especially since it's not it's not measurable, right?
We're talking
So
strategic plan.
I don't know what our litmus test would be in order to say, whatever the cost is and whatever the manipulation is that we have to do with our bus routes, that's just forget about those things. But at the end of the day, how do we measure whether or not we did the right thing?
I think there's a lot of opportunity to measure that, but it goes above and beyond what we're currently doing there are always ways that you can measure something.
Thought you just said that it was the fact that, in fact, I wrote it down.
Don't have a clear understanding of the problem. I'm not saying that we have the data yet, but I'm not saying that it can't be done. That's what our strategic plan is all about I'm talking in circles here, so I'll stop.
Also, just because we don't have the full solution yet doesn't mean we shouldn't ignore the problem, right?
Right.
And I don't think any of us are doing that. I'm sorry for being late, but I just want to know, because I remember it was mentioned the last time we had this discussion, there was a proposal just to shift everything back 30 minutes. And was that addressed?
We kind of talked about it.
talked about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Because
why?
to get where we would, well, in my opinion, to get where we would need to be, we would have to go 45 minutes to get high school back to 8 o'clock, right? And
To have any kind of substantial effect.
right.
I
Well,
guess.
because the guidance is 8:30 is the time that these kids should start, right? The older kids, right? That's the guidance. But to say let's get close to that and get to 8, then you push if you just keep everything as is, you roll it forward 45 minutes. Mrs. Gifford and Mrs. Vaughn just said you're talking about
Lots of
kids at 9:30 starting middle school, and it's just that pushes way late in the day, and then you have issues with parents dropping their kids off to work. So that was the discussion
that's
we
the
had
big
about
one,
that.
yeah.
And Mike, you made a good point about kind of like we shouldn't ignore the problem. And so I had somebody ask me, like, you know, well, what problem are you trying to fix, right? It's kind of hard to say that we have a problem, right, when you're like the third highest rated district in the state, and your kids achieve and all of this kind of good stuff, right? It's just that I can't ignore, you know, what a whole lot of pediatricians say is better for our kids, right? And I think that trying to get towards that best practice is a good goal in itself. And are we necessarily going to see higher STAR test scores? Are we necessarily going to see higher AP scores and all that? I think if we take that way, like, I'm a fan of metrics, but I think that might be the wrong way to look at this, right? I mean, if we can get it done for a reasonable amount of inputs, you know, and so, and I'll just, you know, say that I don't intend on having this conversation once a year or whatever. If we don't come to this, I just wanted to get, I'm really happy with the brain trust that we got here now to figure out is there somewhere we can go, and if we identify constraints that we can't get around, until we can get around them, there's no need to have the conversation again.
Well, and I'll say this, Charles, again, you know, and I don't disagree as a parent of a high school student. I do not disagree with the data. I do not disagree that my child needs more sleep. But at what point, as you said, do pediatrics come in and say kids need more sleep? At what point does that fall on us as a school board instead of a parent at home making sure their kid goes to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock?
Because
I mean, it doesn't
being
change it. I understand that, and we could argue, hey, there's too much homework. We could pull back on homework, but
Well, I'll answer that question.
I
This is
understand.
my attempt to answer that question. It's like, why not say the parents should put their kids to sleep earlier, right? Well, because we can't control that. The one thing we have to do is stay in our lane and control what we control. And the school start time is what's here in the document, is that the school start time is the one malleable thing that school districts can control to make that extra sleep possible. Mr. Felix, you had a comment.
When we were talking about cost benefit, I just wanted to say, because I've done a lot of those, you have to be able to quantify the cost and the benefit. And in this case, I mean, I'm just asking the question, isn't this very similar to the decision you guys made on the security vestibules? I mean, we're talking about the well-being of the kids, potentially, in the future, in case something bad happens. But we don't know if that's going to happen. Okay, so if we do this and we spend a whole bunch of money, and then 5 years from now we say, what return did we get? You might be able to say, well, 1 or 2 fewer kids committed suicide. But you can't prove that. So that's never going to be a standard cost-benefit analysis. So I just wanted to make that comment. You know, this is an insurance policy we're buying here. You never know if that's going to pay out or not.
Well, and then my question to follow up to that would be, when Mr. Cruz talks about $3 million, then why wouldn't we spend $3 million to hire more counselors that would probably have more of an impact on the mental health issue than starting students later? So if we want to talk about cost benefit, then I would be more willing to put that money from that bus route pot of sleeping later to kids that need the counseling, you know, to hiring more counselors that are dedicated, not to counselors that are doing scheduling and those other 504 meetings that they do all day.
That's an opportunity cost discussion, and
absolutely,
yeah, it makes total sense.
That's what I was going to say. Whatever we do, with anything we do, we always have the opportunity cost, right? But, you know, with this in front of us, Dr. Kelly, let me throw this back to you and also to the principals. And Ms. Weimer, did you have anything to say? Do you have the answer? You just been waiting on us to ask you? If you do, we just all
I just
go.
wanted to share, though, meanwhile, we're always looking for ways to help students. And so I know that with them coming early, I know at elementary and middle school, the kids come early. We make use of that time. At high school, we make use of the time like Euler Hour and Eagle Hour. We don't have kids hanging around after school anymore. So they're getting on home and they can do their things because we're taking care of tutoring and those kind of things while you have that captive audience per se. But we always do that too at elementary and middle school. So it's productive. We're working with kids individually. We're getting that homework and the tutoring and that kind of thing done while they're there. So I just wanted to share that so you know that they're not just sitting there. We're actually making good use of that time to help them. So.
I think that Murphy actually raised a great point. and I think Mr. Fields did as well, which is that this is not and this is what Trustee Carbone was saying earlier, right? It's not a single solution problem. And one of the things that I mentioned the last time we talked about this was the number of daily grades, quizzes, and assignments, right? That's dictated by this district, right? We can determine how many assignments we have. And from my understanding and just my relationships with teachers, I mean, the number of required daily grades and quiz grades and the number that I think we have 4 tests per 9 weeks per subject in this district, it's just a bit much. And so I think we can, if we reduce the number of required assignments without limiting the number of assignments that teachers could assign, then you could start seeing students having more time after school to get their work done and then either go to bed earlier or maybe not have so much pressure when they're staying late for band or football. Obviously there's a conversation about GPA, and that's going to be a huge one. But again, with cost-benefit analysis, right? I mean, if we can reduce the amount of stress, which is, I think, the core issue that all of us are trying to address, I think that daily grades, quiz grades, and the number of tests per 9 weeks is the place to start.
I think that if we look at that, and the reason why we have so many is that if you screw it up once if we only have 2 tests per 9 weeks.
Well, that's why, I mean, you don't put a
Right.
cap on it, right? So you don't say you can only do 3.
Right.
You can say, well, we're going to reduce the number
Saying
of
that,
required ones.
yeah.
And if, a teacher has, the teacher's prerogative to help their students out.
I would rely on the principals on this
Yeah.
question that Mike brings up. But I'll give you one little insight that I had with dual credit a few years ago. The problem was that the dual credit teachers only wanted to give, 2 grades for the entire semester. And that
college
caused
professors,
a
yeah.
giant problem for
Yeah.
the kids.
Sure.
So
And I don't think
there's-
anyone's saying we should
yeah,
limit it just to
there's
2.
2 extremes, and
Right.
somewhere we have to meet in the middle on that.
Yeah, I think right now, I think you're right. We're averaging about 4 major assignments. I'll just stick to that. I don't know that we can go any lower than 3 because then you're starting to look at weighing too much. I think we could look at that as a minimum requirement for teachers. I'd like to have further discussion with our teachers to kind of get a better picture
Yeah.
of what that truly looks like. But it's something that we could look at with regards to that. I think also too with daily assignments, that's kind of the formative assessment. We only require 2 a week. That's some of that formative assessment throughout the week that our teachers, we're asking them at a minimum. You're checking on your kids as you're doing your instruction throughout the week, instead of we're running through and you only assessed a couple of times and now you give a test and you really didn't have a good snapshot of whether your kids were learning the material or not. So that's some of where that comes from on the instructional side.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. There should be a checkpoints. Ms. Holt?
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
So daily grades don't count that much in some of the classes by the time you work it all out. But I do think, some of these daily assessments that we're talking about are just check for understanding. They're just participation grades. They're not necessarily a formative teacher graded it. They had to take it home, maybe in math, but in some of the other subjects, it's not that way. So I think the 2 grades a week is a good standard to have, just for parents to be able to follow up and get back with teachers. And from a parent point of view, they would probably not
Well,
like
I
one
also
grade.
like to remind that's just one smaller component. If
For
we're
sure.
looking at mental
For
health
sure.
as a whole, a child that has trauma going on at home or anything else, I mean, that's where I think when we look at our strategic plan and what we're really doing to understand the social emotional needs of our students, it helps us to understand, is the stressor, the main stressor, our academic stress that we're putting on them, or is the academic stress just the icing on the cake?
Right.
I just want to say one more thing about grades. We have really, I think, stepped it up at the high school to try to alleviate some of the mental stress that kids are having because of grades. We put in a waiver now that kids can take some classes that they weren't able to take before as kind of they have to keep an A, but it's a 4.0 class that they can now take as a waiver class still. Now, again, if you're in band and some of those other things, you're already using that. But my Eagle Hour, we went from 51 kids who failed 3 or more classes to 21. in our first 9 weeks. So Eagle Hour is helping kids get into tutorials. I had all my assistant principals call in all those students, and we set up a plan for them to go to tutorials. So, I mean, this hour in the day should and is, I'm seeing it, not only help our AP kids, because yes, it's helping my AP kids are sitting around doing their homework for an hour, eating lunch with their friends and working. But even my regular classroom kids are not after school in tutorials. They are in tutorials for the most part 4, maybe 5 times a week. And teachers are demanding it. They're using it, and they're really applying it. So mental health wise, we may not can answer every question that y'all might have, but I know at the high school we are willing to do anything during the school day to eliminate some of that. In Eagle Hour and some of these other things we're doing, I think I'm really seeing an impact at Dawson.
So just to kind of re-echo what Sean
Oh, and
was
support counselors, I have to say that, Ms. Weimer just said it,
Yeah.
are amazing. Just say they have been a gift at my campus. Ms. Schuler is amazing. I'm sure y'all want to say the same thing.
Say that again.
Well-
I'm sorry, Ms. Holt.
The support counselors.
Yeah,
The student support counselors are amazing. The,
Well, you know,
the best
just-
thing we've added to the high school to help our students and our other counselors, just to be able to allow them to do what
What they went to school
a grade
for.
level.
Okay, so I agree. Just to kind of echo what Ms. Holt was talking about, you know, and their counselors being great. We added counselors this year, and then to kind of circle back to what Sean was talking about, when it comes to cost benefit analysis, I truly believe that if we hired additional counselors for the additional cost, which we have, you know, to affect the betterment of the student population. But let's not forget our Rise Mentoring. Rise Mentoring was a huge success for us and continues to be. So I don't know that we're not fixing the problem and we don't necessarily really know it. So we're really chipping away at those things, you know, a little at a time here and there. And, you know, and that kind of goes back to what's the issue. And at the end of the day, I don't really hear the outcry from the parents.
I'm glad
to
you mentioned
say
that.
we need to change the start times.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to say we talked about mental health and whatnot, but as I mentioned, the crux of the matter was insufficient sleep or lack of sleep or sleep deprivation. And, you know, it would be great to pull all the levers we can to release the academic stress, but the science still says those kids, the older kids, they shut down later. Thus, it's better for them to have a later start, right? So, right, you're not hearing an outcry for it. I mean, that's clear, right? But I think our conversation has come back to the point where we're not opposed to it. You just got to find a way to do it, and the way to do it, it's not really there.
So I'm going to touch on what Ms. Holt said, excuse me. But, you know, when I'm getting out of this, and it kind of hit me as I look around the room, we're a bunch of old people in the room, aren't we?
Except for Michael.
I mean, once you get it,
That's her over here. There you go.
All right, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Keep your hand down.
Yeah, be
I'm
careful.
serious. I'm serious. Raise your hand if you consider yourself a millennial, which is the ages of 22 to 37. So if you're 37, there you go. Okay. So you're millennial. And so it's a big gap when you talk about millennials from the ages of 33 to 37. I'm not a millennial. I've heard that several times. So as I sit in this room and I think about it, I said, you know what Crystal's saying, what Michael's saying, what Sean's saying, what Jeff's saying, what everybody's saying. Here's the problem.
Should have put my name tag.
We're not listening to what our kids are saying. And so maybe we need to identify what their stressors are and what they're going through. And then we could come back and look at it as a big picture. Because, you know, the biggest thing that always bothered me was that I would get pushed. When we talked about this from before, even with Mr. Berger, which I love that man, you know, with all my heart, but, you know, it's what's best for adults. Sometimes we don't want to change our world. We don't want to change. And I get stuck in my rut, but what's best for kids, sometimes we lose sight of that. So I don't know how it would look, Dr. Kelly, but the age group from 12 to 18 in our district, if we could possibly, I don't know, maybe the board says yes or no, this is my suggestion, possibly send out a survey of the kids of what their stressors are in their life and what bothers them. Make it a 10 to 15 question, and let's find out, and then we can take a look at, and if schools, and if they figure, okay, I'm between this age group and this age group and whatever it is, then you could say, if one says, I get lack of sleep, and if 90% of if this age group says I get lack of sleep, then that's something we got to look at. If it's school, but if we don't identify, look, here's the deal. We don't all know what's going on. We could pretend, and we can read books, and we can look at, but we did not grow up in this era. And it's all new to us, and we're trying to put a Band-Aid on something. And we don't know how it looks. I got 4 kids, and I talk to them all the time about it, and they're surprising me with stuff, and I'm like, wow. I just, so.
But I think
let me
I don't know. I mean, that's just.
I air caution on the survey
Yeah.
because we saw with this last survey, the non-response rates are huge, and there are several different, covariations going on. What I would do, and I think you're absolutely right, we should kind of get a feel of what the students are going through. Maybe pull out 20 of the most average students who are on level courses, each grade level, something like that, and then pull out same from the dual credit courses, same from the AP courses, just to try and get a feel. Ask them if there is a problem, because if we're trying to solve something that they're not feeling.
Well, we're going to have that problem. We're
We
going to have
got
that
a
opportunity
student-
next month, right?
Right.
Well, but
Because
that's with an incredibly small group of students.
I
But let me-
disagree.
let me
You
still
can
hear
make
the
a
same
class
stuff.
grade
let me
just the
let me-
same and have a response rate that's much higher.
Let me-
If you
let
put
me-
a carrot at the end of it for anyone, you can get a survey that has a much higher response rate. So I don't want to discredit that
For sure.
idea.
I mean, if you want to give them credit or something, that's
Yeah.
But
let me-
again,
let
if
me
we're
back
if we're a
up.
board of trustees,
Right. Let me back
I
up
mean,
from
now we're getting into surveying students about
Right.
their mental being. I mean, what point do we separate ourselves from a board of governance of the district to what the district principals and superintendent does in their day to day? I mean,
Well, and so I don't think we need to go there, right? And so, again, just to refocus us, we're not arguing that more sleep would be better, right? Learning what the kids' stresses are and all that kind of good stuff, that's an awesome idea, but I don't think that they need to identify. Well, they said that sleep time or having sleep is important to their health and their academic performance, right? That was in the survey, right? But again, we're going back to the fact that, all right, we're trying to align what we do as a governing board. The one lever we can pull is the school start time, right? So how do we pull that lever, right? And what I'm saying is that it's clear that nobody's fighting it, right? But we just have constraints
Lots of them.
that are preventing us from getting there right now.
well, let me ask you this: if you task the administration and principals with finding the solution, or what is the solution, or what should we do, and they come back and they tell us their recommendation is no change,
They did.
then which they did. So you're saying, okay, I get what you're saying.
Got it.
We hear your recommendation. You don't want it to change, but we're going to change it because that's where you're at. I mean, you.
No.
But I
We're not
hear him
changing it.
saying it all.
No,
I think that's exactly what we're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what
We've
we're saying.
had 2 conversations about this.
No, I was pretty clear about why we got back together today, right? And I appreciate you assigning this whole thing to me, so I'm going to take ownership of it. But I'm not. I didn't get us back together today because I like to hear myself talk. I should actually be at work. I got other stuff to be doing, right? So I'm sure you do as well. But the point is, we had the discussion, and student well-being did not come into the discussion.
We didn't talk about students.
We're talking about that now, right? So I understand now that we don't have an issue with the science. We don't have an issue with trying to get in line with these best practices, right? We're just trying to figure out how we get there. And if we had the dollars to do it, we could do it. We see what the main constraint is, right? And so, Dr. Kelly, I was going to throw this over to you maybe about 15 minutes ago, but it's to the point where I can kind of see where our position is, right? And, as a board member, as a governing member, I understand the science, and how can I go back and tell people, yeah, we believe in it, but we just can't get there, right? And I'm comfortable saying that now, seeing as how we've gotten together and said, all right, man, we just don't have we don't have the plan.
Capacity,
So
the
what I was going to ask you is, Is there a way forward on this given our current constraints?
The most alarming thing we're facing right now is for next year, David Moody and I are working on this, is an $8 million deficit. Even though we were able to curb it to $4 million on that 1 year Hurricane Harvey exception, we face that $8 million plus deficit depending on cost of living or whatever goes up next year. So to add, you know, like Charles has very eloquently said, if we didn't have any constraints, then I'd probably just say let's go to a 2-tier system, hire the additional buses. But the cost is so incredibly high that it's just not even in the planet. It's not even in a possibility at present. So, you know,
Don't know what the legislature's going to do.
and to tie Lance, what Lance was saying back into it, and I heard some of this from Crystal at other times when she's talked to me. I think part of the surveying need is some sort of mental health survey that does early detection of problems and stressors and things like that. And we are working on that right now to see if we can develop. There are a number of instruments out there, and to see if there is one that can help us identify stressors and identify specific kids who need follow-up and so on. I think
that's awesome, and it also gives us a baseline measure of which, if, and we'll talk about it later, but if we quantify academics all day long, all of the things that we have kind of in our strategic plan moving forward on the mental health focus are all qualitative. They're all stories that we tell, and we do some awesome work. We just don't have any data to prove that we're world class in that way. I think we're already there. But that is one component that I feel like beefs up our practice in that area, that gives us the proof is in the pudding, and we're already doing it. It's just we need the meat to tell us about it.
You know, my plan.
Dr. Allen?
Go ahead, Charles.
Dr. Allen?
No, because you were talking about the identifying the stressors, and what Ms. Holt was saying earlier about the crisis counselor. I think that has been a big part of identifying the things that are wrong. So we've had, I think the council came to me last week, like 6 or 7 kids that we have gotten to some outside services to get help, that have come forward with comments and conversations about suicide, which is an uptick, a huge uptick from before. It could be the times, it could be as things are going on, but we also think that because we have an additional person that is there to hear them, they're more likely to speak up. So we could survey and find all these things, but if we don't have someone to deal with them, it really wouldn't matter. And right now in the junior high, we're splitting this. So we've seen all of this come up within this first 12 weeks of school with just having a person every other day. So, I mean, I would prefer to have that person every day than change the time and go through all of this other stuff, so that we could just have a person to actually deal with the issues that we have.
That'll take 2 more counselors.
Yes,
So
sir.
what you're saying,
2 more.
We'll take them at the elementaries and middle schools.
Hold on a second. Whoa. Hold on a second. So what you're saying is, and I'm going to call them a support counselor, because I'm not going to say student, because hopefully they're helping out staff, and thank you, because that's also a whole nother thing, right? So you're saying you could have you need a full-time one. Okay. I mean, does everybody like the person? Who all has one? I can't remember what we
High
did.
schools each.
I can't remember what we did. I apologize.
That's okay. Each of the high schools has one, but the junior highs each have to share. So there's 2 for 4 junior highs.
Okay, and so.
Nor elementary.
You know, we're the open discussion. Feel free to say, you know, do y'all feel a need for at the middle schools to have one?
Exclamation mark,
And-
mark.
How many counselors? I'm
It ain't
trying
nothing
not,
but
I'm trying
money,
not-
man.
I'm trying to keep it workshop, so let's keep it light. Yeah, keep it light.
We've seen it work for the junior highs and middle schools. In the event that we were able to have one, we would definitely welcome it, because there are situations that are starting not only at middle school but at elementary that the need is there. We definitely understand that there are some constraints that, you know, we all have to look at. But if the opportunity was there, we would definitely welcome, and we would even welcome sharing one if we had to.
Yeah.
And what I'll say is, I'm good.
I'm going to say the same thing on the elementary.
Okay.
Because this year we have seen, oh my goodness, it is just grown unbelievable the kindergarten age. And when you're talking about interventions for students, we all know intervention starts at the early age. And so again, and we do have one counselor at the elementary.
So when I was teaching in Pasadena ISD, we had a peer facilitator. Many of y'all know what that is. A peer facilitator on campus that was able to help out with a lot of different things, right? And so that's a whole nother idea. Putting more, you know, I've been reading a lot of articles and books about putting more people on campus as opposed to more people. There's a whole train of thought of do you help people out from the top down, or do you help the people from the bottom up? You know, it's a whole philosophy thing. But anyway, I'm just glad to hear that, because you know we've been pushing for that for, you know, I've been pushing for that for several years. I'm glad to see it's working. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I just
so-
heard him say that early
Okay.
prevention is key, right? Or early detection is key, right?
yeah.
So
All right.
maybe
So
in our,
I think, and I'm not going to speak for the entire board, but I get the feel that we have looked at this. We agree that the science is there. We agree with it. But at this moment, fiscal constraints, transportation constraints, all those kind of things are out there, and it's not something that we can overcome at this point. But because we have had this conversation, there are other things that we can do to help our student support. So, and to help our staff and to help you guys. And I value you guys taking your time and really sharing with us.
Anybody else want to? I mean, I know you wanted the mic a second. Does anything you wanted to say?
No, that was earlier. So
Okay.
basically, Mike, when you mentioned that, talk to the students, when I went on the trip to Rome, actually, this summer, I was telling Dr. Kelly, I had 5 in my group, and they were advanced students at PHS and DHS. And they actually, when they found out who I was, they were like, "You're not going to change the start time, are you?"
They don't
And the
want it.
interesting part is some of them had the art and the piano that they take somewhere else, not at school. So they were like, "I get home, I get my homework done, I have time for all that, and I can't imagine being any later." So I did
Yeah.
want to share that we do hear kids out there.
for sure.
so-
No, I know
And
that.
I'm sure there's others that don't feel that way, but I just wanted to share that.
I've gotten their tweets.
No.
They don't want it changed. I know that. But
And I know, and I know that the district is doing what we can as far as educating our parents through our communications department and different workshops and different things that we are offering them. As far as, I mean, I know Chinda Moore has.
You know, one other thing I'd like to mention there, Rebecca, is that tentatively I've got planned in January for Chenda and others to come forward and giving you the whole mental health counseling briefing and maybe a chance for interaction with the board.
Yeah.
Next month will be bilingual ESL, and then we're going to in January
That's
do
great.
counseling
Awesome.
and
So,
mental health.
I mean, I do appreciate board entertaining this one last time, just to make sure that, you know, we recognize that there is an issue, but, you know, we did what we can. We've done our due diligence, I believe. So, I do appreciate the time spent with us, so.
Can I echo that?
Yes.
I just really appreciate the collaborative effort. That
Yes.
This is the kind of thing where everybody's in the room at the same time. I mean, it would be that much better if we had a few more parents or students to represent that. But the fact that we have an ambassador for those groups step forward and that you're willing to share your opinion so honestly is very valued and appreciated. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so. So I'm gonna close this workshop. Okay, I closed the workshop. Yay! And we'll open in
Not a
about
close,
5-minute break, and then I'll open. I call this meeting of the Pearland Independent School District Board of Trustees to order on November 13th, 2018 at 5:04 p.m. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Let the record show that trustees Carbone, Murphy, Gooden, Berry, Floyd, Botkin, and Decker are all present. Okay, so we are going to move into the portion of the board meeting where the board receives input from patrons. Each person who addresses the board will have 5 minutes to speak on his or her issue. Because of topic posting requirements of the Open Meetings Act, board members will not ask questions of the patron and will not answer any questions posted to the board by the patron. No action can be taken on any issue presented during this patron comment segment of the board meeting. Patrons addressing the board will be notified when they are approaching the last 30 seconds of their allotted time to speak. Okay, so we have Mr. Kane, William Kane.
All right. Thank you guys so much for letting me come here and speak. So I've asked to have a piece of paper drop for you guys so you can kind of have a better idea of what it is that we're doing. So my name is Billy Kane. I work with a nonprofit called Radical Empathy Education Foundation. And we're a nonprofit, and our goal is to end human trafficking in one generation. I'm pretty sure you guys, being near Houston and part of Houston, understand exactly how bad this is. This is a personal fight for me. My children, I found out, were actually being groomed by a friend of mine that I had known for 10 years. He was basically trying to normalize sexual discussions and behavior with my children. And I've worked in the video game industry for 25 years, and I wanted to kind of combine my knowledge of how interactive experiences can make an impression on kids and adults. And I wanted to educate people about this. It's something I found out that our friends and our friends' children didn't know, our children's friends didn't know anything about. And so spent about 2 years kind of learning about this entire field and how to deal with it. So I'll give you guys some statistics. In 2016, the University of Texas did the first statewide study of any state in the United States to try to figure out just how bad is human trafficking in the state of Texas. It's very difficult to come up with numbers across the world. All the numbers are soft, if you will, because it's very difficult to get the statistics correct. So their statistics show that they believe there are over 300,000 victims of human trafficking across across Texas, which includes forced labor as well as minor sex trafficking. And of that, they believe that 79,000 of those 300,000 are actually victims of minor sex trafficking. Obviously, Houston is like the largest port of entry and a hub of human sex trafficking in the United States. What we did was we created a virtual reality experience. It's kind of documented for you guys. It's a very interactive. Players have, or users actually have agency, so they can determine what they want to do with it. It's sort of Montessori-like instead of like just being presented with a program. So it's a very personal experience. You actually kind of take on the role of a girl she's 13 or 14 in the experience, and that's a very common age for kids to be drawn into this situation, unfortunately. So you walk through the world as her, and she tells you about objects that look like normal everyday things. So like she sees some lipstick, and you would think that lipstick is about putting it on your lips or whatever, but to her it's about trying to present herself as being older or younger or things like that. So basically you start learning how twisted that the world is for these kids and actually young adults. So the idea is we're trying to put you in the perspective of somebody else to get you to feel empathy for them. Virtual reality has all these wonderful, well-documented, statistically proven experiences. So like it can increase your retention rate of material by 50%. It makes learning more enjoyable by 62%, gives you 44% more confidence in what you learn. You're experiencing this, it's experiential learning. Kids actually become more likely to seek out more information, and the increase in retention rates of this material increases like almost 50%. And the idea with the anti-trafficking training that's being done right now, or the challenge that you have, is trying to create something that a kid will remember that's better than a PowerPoint, because that's what you're competing against. And a PowerPoint, you can sleep through it, you can text through it, you can do anything that you want. Maybe you'll have them send you the PowerPoint, but we do is we actually put them in a situation where they have to interact, they have to experience this. It's a very powerful thing. So what we're doing right now is we're starting 5 pilot schools. We have started in one school in Austin, and we're getting started in one in San Diego. We'd like to do more here in Texas. Obviously, like to help some people out here in Houston, Pearland, everywhere else. So our goal being that we want to end this trafficking problem in one generation. We want to think about it like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. If it's a grassroots effort and we can push this stuff up, make efforts and changes on a local level. We want to get these kids activated so that at the end of the program, they actually they become change makers to learn how to make a difference in their neighborhood, whether it's going and working with the women's shelter or going anything. So I'll give you an idea of who we've been talking to create this program. We started with the Texas Attorney General's
Yeah.
Office of Human
30
Trafficking.
30
minutes. I love these things.
Okay.
This is perfect. So we started with them and we told them what we wanted to accomplish. They worked with us on the basics of a script. Since then, I've gone all over the United States. I've met with UNICEF, ECPAT, Allies Against Slavery, Prevent Human Trafficking, Traffic 911. I've been to conferences all over. And this program changes people's perspective. It changes their life, whether it's parents, people that's been working with victims, police officers, families. It blows their minds. And I want to be able to help you guys. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Or Mr. Kane. All right. We do not have any more signed up to speak to us. So, the Board of Trustees of the Pearland Independent School District will adjourn into closed session at 5:11 p.m. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussions in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in open meeting. Good evening. The board will reconvene in open session at 6:06 p.m. No action was taken in closed session. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move we accept and approve the superintendent's recommendation for employment of personnel as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Mr. Gooden and a second by Mr. Botkin. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay, the motion carries 7-4 and 0 against. All right. Crystal.
Yes, ma'am. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Texas. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. So thank you all for being here tonight. I look forward to celebrating the accolades and achievements of each and every one of your students. But we all know that behind every student is a family that stands behind them and cheerleads with them and stands behind them in tears and sweat as they work through all of their achievements on the home front. So thank you all for what you do for your children and to bolster our district. We do really appreciate it. During this time in my comments, I also want to take some time to acknowledge the National Appreciation Week for LSSPs. I know that I hold this credential, but because I hold this credential, I know what a thankless job it is. I'm no longer a practicing LSSP, although I still hold my license. LSSP stands for a Licensed Specialist in School Psychology. We have about 16 LSSPs across our district. And LSSPs are kind of the quiet soldier working through a quiet office, working on every individual needs. They have a broad scope of systems change to grow every student in their school and narrow down to a scope of working on the academic and behavioral or emotional interventions for specialized students within our district. LSSPs are charged with crisis management, with counseling. They believe in data-driven decision-making, relationship builders. They are people that are kind of like the glue that can hold a school and a district together. And so I just want to give a shout out to our LSSPs across our district for the work and the effort that they put in every day. I know that educators in general is a thankless position, but they are often a solo individual on each campus, and so I want to give a shout out to them this evening. I also don't want to be remiss than to thank our veterans for Veterans Day that just passed. They are, again, another thankless job of going over and protecting our freedoms. And so I want to make sure to recognize, if you'll stand, any veteran that's here this evening. you so much for your efforts and for protecting all of our freedoms. Thank you for laying down your life for someone else. It's appreciated more than I can ever express in words. And if you agree to, or if you'll believe in this way, to be able to bow your head in prayer with me tonight. Father God, I just come to you tonight in gratefulness. I thank you for the many blessings that you've bestowed upon Pearland ISD. I thank you for the provisions of every single detail. Just thank you for providing the people and thoughts and processes at which make us a district that stands above all else. I thank you for the opportunity to serve on this board, and tonight I ask you for ears to hear words and intentions of my colleagues, including the board and administration here this evening. I ask for discernment and wisdom, and I ask that each of us have an ever-constant reminder of the impact that our decisions make for every child in this district. May every student feel the love that you have in store for them. Thank you so much for this time, and thank you for an opportunity to come to you in prayer. In your name we pray, amen.
Awesome. Okay, the next on the list is.
Rebecca, can I say something before
Yes.
you move on? Yeah. So just for all you playing out in the audience, we had I don't know, it was kind of I won't say historic, but a cool thing that we're doing as a board. Was it last month we went to Jameson, or? Yeah. So we went to Jameson last month, and I want to call it a lunch and learn, you know, with the staff, and tomorrow we're going to East, Junior High East. So as a board, we're making our rounds around the district to try and engage with the teachers and things like that of that nature. So to listen to their concerns and you know, just get to know them a little bit better. So this board has been phenomenal in doing and reaching the community, and I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out. So.
We have committee updates, and I think that I'm the only one that's on the committee. So I am actually going to report some information about our Education Foundation and things that have been going on. We just had our 5th annual Grown Up Spelling Bee, and that was last Wednesday. Let's see, we raised over $13,000 for that one night, which is awesome. And then Total Wine and More is a new store that's opening up in Silver Lake area, and they have chosen the foundation to be the beneficiary of their grand opening. So this weekend, they're giving 10% of their wine sales throughout the weekend for a minimum of a $10,000 donation to our foundation. So if you're getting wine for your Thanksgiving feasts, do so and help out our foundation. Also, we have a new thing that is started this year, a Feast for the Foundation, which is Tuesday, November 27th. It is 26 different participating restaurants in and around Pearland on Tuesday, which is, we're calling it Feast Day, and they're going to give back a percentage of their sales that day to our foundation. So, no, the Tuesday after, yes, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So please encourage your friends and family to dine out for education. We were also featured on Great Day Houston, and that was awesome because they were talking about the feast day, so what we're doing for that. So anyway, so the foundation is doing what they do, raising money for innovative teaching grants. So
Just kind of piggybacking on Lance's idea that our board is all truly engaged and moving forward in the same direction. We all financially backed unanimously as the board, the Education Foundation through the Spelling Bee as well. So I want to make it a point to point out that we are all unanimously in support of this awesome opportunity for our
even though we
kids.
didn't do so well. in spelling.
I wasn't going to mention
Well,
that.
I'm just saying, each year,
We
I think I'm
cheered
the
the
week, we do cheer well, so, anyway.
It was
You
different
have any
this
more
year
committee-
because we just
committee
didn't earn
items?
enough points to get to the finals. So
All right. Oh, and
it
then
wasn't a
we
particular
yeah,
word.
the bond oversight.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the bond oversight committee.
Yeah, so we have, I serve on the Bond Oversight Committee, and we have a meeting tomorrow, and it's going to be I don't know, an afternoon and learn, an on-site meeting. We're having it at on the campus of Pearland High School. We're going to be looking at some of the facilities there at the rig and surrounding areas right there. So it's going to be an enlightening experience for the Bond Oversight Committee. We get to see what's going on over there.
Anything else?
Yeah, if you want to update on the HGAC, I have a meeting on the 29th. So our HGAC will meet and they'll select a representative and an alternate representative to serve on the Houston Galveston Area Council Board. So I'll update you
running?
next month. I was an alternate last year, the previous year, so we'll see how many. Not too many people actually want to do it, so we'll see. I think the last time we were just did it, so.
Very cool.
Well, and this is not necessarily a committee or an appointment that we have from our board, but the NBCEA just recently had their equipment fundraising breakfast, and Chef Dunn did a great job at providing breakfast for everyone. It was here in the ESC, and I think we were successful in selling all of our equipment. So anybody that donated to that cause, we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, Chef Dunn is awesome. All right, thank you, Jeff. Okay, so our most favorite
good.
time of the evening is our board recognition.
Good evening. Pearland Independent School District is home to some of the most talented students in the state of Texas. And this is the time, as Ms. Decker said, that we like to recognize those students for their hard work and achievements. Parents, please feel free when your student comes across to come up, take photos. We're also taking photos, and those will be posted to our district Facebook page and onto our Flickr page that you will be able to download in a couple of days, so be sure to check that out. Tonight, we are proud to honor high school students who stand out in national scholarship and recognition programs. Thanks to high PSAT scores, these students may qualify for scholarships and have their names and academic information sent to U.S. colleges and universities. First, we'll recognize students who recently were designated as commended students in the National Merit Scholarship Program. They rank among the top 5% of more than 1.5 million students who took the PSAT in 2017. From Dawson High School, our commended students include Zachary Hall, and Josna Sanjan. So sorry, Josna. Next, we'd like to honor students who met the highest standards on the advanced placement exams. This year, we have 641 students. They're not all here tonight. They couldn't make it, so we won't be here all night. But we do have a few of them here with us. That 641 who achieved scholar status is an increase over last year, which is phenomenal. We're so proud of these students. Our first students are ones who are recognized as AP Scholars with Distinction. And that means that these students earned an average score of 3.5 on all AP exams and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more AP exams. First, we have Melissa Johnson from Dawson High School. Also, all these are from Dawson. Samara Bowie. Elham Biswas, Emma Blunt, Cade Bushkull, Alyssa Cahoy, Anna Rodriguez. Also, this next student was designated as National Merit Commended, as well as this AP honor, Jonathan Frazier. Next, we have Matthew Guidry. Also receiving a National Merit Commended Student Recognition, Lindsay Harrington. Another AP Scholar and National Merit Commended Student, Marshall Haynes. Matthew Harada. Devin Johnson. Jonathan Maxwell. Oh, Manish, you might have to help me. That's right. Manish Parmeswaran. Almost. Daniel Rhodes. Angel Santhosh. Jasmine Scott. Noel Seagroves. This next student is also a National Merit Commended student, Amrita Sibi. And Lisa Way from Dawson. Our next students are AP Scholars with distinction from Pearland High School, Tiana Baker. Also a National Merit Commended student, Susan Cleary. AP Scholar and National Merit Commended student, Kara Decker. Madison Deese, or Dice, sorry. Caleb Kimball. Natalie Myers. Richard Rudek. Sarah Shokut. Also, AP Scholar and National Merit Committed student, Jessica Sherbon. Or Jessa, I'm so sorry, Jessa. A National Merit Commended student and AP Scholar, Justin Squares. Samantha Smith. Mindy Thigh. And Cole Varga. Now, our next students, our National AP Scholar Award, received the National AP Scholar Award. Less than 1% of AP exam takers worldwide earn this award. These students achieved an average score of 4 or higher on all exams and scores of 4 or higher on 8 or more AP exams. From Dawson High School, Simon Byrne, Ayush Dave, Samwad Kazi, also a National Merit Commended student, Bill Tang, and from Pearland High School, Angela Tran. Tonight, we also recognize several of our students who have been named National Hispanic Recognition Scholars. These students must be at least 1/4 Hispanic or Latino and have achieved at least a minimum PSAT score for their region. Students with a grade point average of 3.5 or higher are designated as scholars, and only 5,000 students nationwide receive this recognition each year. National Hispanic Recognition Scholars from Dawson High School include And the first one is also an AP Scholar with Distinction, Julia Bennett. Alexis Brentz. Also a National Merit Commended student, Ashley Brentz. Sydney Cisneros. National Hispanic Recognition and AP Scholar with Distinction, Tessa Garcia. National Hispanic Recognition and AP Scholar with Distinction, Marisol Penry. Another one who also received AP Scholar with Distinction, Cole Ritter. And then also National Hispanic Recognition and AP Scholar with Distinction, Caitlin Rodriguez. And from Pearland High School, this next student is a National Hispanic Recognition Scholar, AP Scholar with Distinction, and National Merit Commended student, Aaron Bovey. Our next student also received all three honors: National Hispanic Recognition, AP Scholar with Distinction, National Merit Commended, Anissa Castorina. Next, we have AP Scholar with Distinction as well, Gabriel Castro. And finally, last but not least, National Hispanic Recognition and AP Scholar with Distinction, Bailey Marin. Congratulations again to all of our students. Let's give all of our kids another round of applause. This concludes our recognition this evening. Thank you.
A motion made by Mr. Botkin and a second by Mr. Floyd. Any further discussion? We're on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay, the motion carries 7-4 and 0 against. All right. We are on regular agenda number B1.
Madam President, we are honored to have with us our auditing firm, and they're ready to come forward and give a summary of their findings for your possible approval.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Kevin Cadenhead from Kennemer Masters in Lunsford. Also have Wade Whitlow here from our firm. Wade and I are both partners in the firm. Wade is the primary partner actually on the audit. He did most of the audit work, the report writing, and working with Georgiani and her department. I was also involved in the audit work and very detailed review part of the audit as well. And a lot of your familiar faces have seen me here as partner in the past. So we're just continuing on that transition. So with that said, I want to make a couple of comments about the audit, how it went. I want to point you to a few things in the report, not too many, just to raise your attention. And then, of course, if you have any questions, we'll talk about those. First off, I want to congratulate Georgiani and her department. The first year for a comprehensive annual financial report last year, which you'll see the Certificate of Excellence was achieved, and that is in here. And that is a significant accomplishment. Goes to the quality of your financial reporting. So I think it's a good achievement. There is also, yes, a summary financial report, which has been provided. I won't go into that, but it's a very good way to look at statistics and financial information So those are to be applauded. Congratulations, Georgiani.
I want to go back. You said this is the first year?
The first year that is actually submitted as a comprehensive annual financial report to the Government Finance Officers Association, which is a body of accountants, basically, that review these financial reports. And if you meet all the requirements, you get a certificate of excellence. And they are extensive reporting requirements. So this is actually the first year. Now, all of your audit reports have always been in a complete format, just not all the way to the GFOA standard, which requires statistical tables and a lot of additional information. So I hope that answers your question.
This is the first year we've received this certificate?
That's correct.
Wow.
Okay. So with that said, again, congratulations. In terms of our audit, the best you could ever hope for in an audit, I've said this before, is that the auditor has a plan. That's always a good thing. And that the auditor was able to execute the plan. Because believe me, there are audits where you have a plan and you go in and you're off. You have to go into areas that you had not planned. And so we did not have to deviate from our plan. We were able to execute it efficiently and effectively. And there's really no audit issues that we need to bring to your attention in terms of the financial controls or the actual audit itself. You'll see that as I point to a few things within the audit report. So we've given you the book so we can follow along the same pages. If you'll flip behind the second tab, you'll see the financial section. And right behind that page, you'll see our letterhead from our firm. This is our auditor's report on your financial statements. This is the part of the financials that belongs to us, our firm. The rest obviously belongs to you. And there's a lot of words here, but at the top of page 2, the second page, is the actual opinion. This wording is what's referred to as an unmodified opinion. That's new terminology within the last 3 or 4 years that basically tells the reader that we, the auditors, have audited this report and there's nothing else we need to tell you. Everything in here is materially correct. If it was modified, it might say something like, we have audited the report and everything is correct except for this area or that area. So that's why they call it unmodified. There's no modifications. Other language in this report goes in and talks about other schedules, such as the federal award schedule, which we did what we call single audit, compliance auditing of federal programs. So there is a section in the back which we'll refer to briefly when we get there. The following pages, starting on page 5, is referred to as management's discussion and analysis. This is a section that really goes into laying out the foundation for how the financial statements are derived and giving you some key financial information. So I'm going to start right off by making you aware, which I'm sure you already are, that we accountants out there, primarily the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, has put in a new standard that's requiring you to accrue the unfunded liability for other post-employment benefits. So what is that? Health insurance to retired school district employees, okay? And what that means is they're going to look just like they did a few years ago at the pension. They're going to look at what is the actuarial amount that is liability on today's dollars and how much is actually actuarially in the fund to fund that. And that delta is a liability. It's big. It's very big. And so if you look at the pension liability, which we started accruing a few years ago according to standard, this is about 5 times larger. Okay? So I want to show you what the impact of that is, and then I'm going to tell you not to worry about it. Okay? So if you go to page 7, the bottom of page 7, I want you to look at the bottom right-hand corner where it says total net position, and those two numbers are in brackets. That means it's a deficit. It means we don't have net position. And the number, an unrestricted, is prior year got restated for this new standard is 96 million negative. Current year unrestricted 79. We're looking at the two numbers, 31.9 total deficit to 9.6 deficit at the end of this year. So what happened was they went back and they did the actuarial study, and they said, according to the standard, we're going to put it at the end of the prior fiscal year, and that was over $100 million of liability to just your district. Okay? And then they got to the end of the next year, and it actually corrected itself, and it only ended up being 61 million negative. So why do we care about this? Well, It's a standard, and it's what's been going on in the non-governmental entities reporting structure. But there's really nothing you can do. You're funding retirement according to the actual funding requirements. You have not missed funding. You're not underfunded. Same thing on pensions. You've not missed funding. You're not underfunded. There's really not a lot you can do about that. And Wade and I were actually talking about this on the way up. I believe the first rating that comes from TEA, actually we're anticipating this. We believe they came out with an announcement that says, we're going to factor this out. So basically, we're going to add back your pension and your OPEB liabilities as if they didn't exist, so we can come to a net position number that meets the first rating requirements, which, of course, you meet the first rating requirements.
But, you know, Kevin, what's hard for me to understand, and maybe this is what you're saying, is that this is really a liability that the state has for post-employment retirement benefits. It really doesn't relate to us in
As
reality.
I mean, I think that what you can do about it is nothing. Okay,
Yeah.
so I agree with it in that regard, but in terms of you bearing some of the burden on your financial statements, because as a participant, the participants are the ones that have the employees who are in the plan, and you are the one that funds that employee's retirement. So by definition, the way the plan's structured, district puts in a portion and state puts in a portion, okay? So that, in that relative nature, your portion is your liability. So,
For current employees, though, not for.
well, they look at the total population. So they look at all of your current employees. I mean, there's a significant actuarial study done here. All of your employees, what their ages are, what their salaries are, what the contribution rates are, what the how many current retirees are there now, how old are they, what's the age table for how long they're going to live, you know, all that goes into what's the return on investment, what are our investments, and they put all that together and say, here's how much we got in the plus bucket, and here's how much we owe, and that delta is a net owe. And that, I could stay on this topic for a long time. I don't want to go too deep into it. The reason being is, if the investment rate of return changes 1%, we get like a 20 million swing in the liability. So it's just really
For the district, for our district.
for your district. I mean, and the point being is, it's going to fluctuate from year to year. The actuaries will start to zone in on this thing where it won't change as much. If the interest rate starts rising, this is a unique thing. If the interest rate starts rising, then that liability will probably start to shrink because the rate of return on investment will increase, et cetera. So it's really just a financial measure that is being forced to be put on the balance sheet because non-governmental entities are now reporting it that way. So government is catching up with the rest of the world. An example would be, and we don't know how this is going to impact, but the bondholders or the bond rating agencies are the ones that look at those financial statements that have full accrual, all these liabilities. They've always known that you had an OPEB liability and a pension liability. It just never was on the balance sheet because they're comparing you to entities who aren't governmental. So the natural understanding is that we don't expect bond ratings to change because of these accrued liabilities. But we've seen some strange things happen before. So just because Kevin, the auditor, said it doesn't mean that it won't happen. But that's the expectation currently. So I hope that's not too much. Or
So we're just starting to account for the OPEB requirement on the balance sheet, right? Reporting wise.
So I'll show you that. That's
From a
really
road-
good. We're going to flip to that page now anyway. So if you will go to page 16. About midway down the page where it says total liabilities, if you'll move up just from that, you see that the net OPEB liability is $61,916,000. And right above that is the pension liability, $36,245. So it's really about twice as large in your case. In some cases, depending on the magnitude of it, it's 4 or 5 times as large. And that's where you see that. That was not there before. That's what caused your net position to go from plus to minus. Probably enough about that, but we could talk about it for hours, so apologize about that. On the good side, go to page 18. This is your governmental fund balance sheet. This is how you actually run the district. You budget for how much money is going to come in. You budget for how much money we're going to spend. You set a tax rate. This is where the actual accounting occurs. There are no pension liabilities or OPEB liabilities or any long-term assets or other debt in these financial statements. So I always go to the bottom right-hand corner, and you can see that your fund balance in total is 149.3 million plus. Of that amount, 30.2 million is unassigned, and another 13 million is assigned. So basically, you've got $43 million sitting in fund balance on the plus side. If you flip to page 20, which is the income statement, under general fund column, the very bottom, you see that the net change in fund balance is a positive 1.3 million. That's what I would call net income. So your cash flow in exceeded your cash flow out on the general fund by $1.3 million, positive. And if you actually include the transfer out that it transferred over to some of the other governmental funds, the general fund was actually a positive $2 million. Okay, so it's a long way of saying we spent a long time talking about these liabilities that we accrued, but the actual performance of the district was in line with expectations and actually exceeded expectations. I'll show you when we look at the budget page. And your fund balance is fiscally responsible. If you'll turn behind the next tab, this will show you a couple more things. It says required supplementary information, and on page 68 is your actual versus your budget for the general fund. Now this is significant and primarily in the total expenditure area. So you're required by law as a governmental entity not to expend more than you appropriate. So we're happy to say that you were actually under budget in total expenditures. You can see that, 7.2 million. But even more important, good fiscal responsibility is by no function did you exceed budget. So that's also very good. The last thing I want to point your attention to is behind the very last tab. It's the federal award section. And there are two letters from our firm in this section. The first letter is a letter on controls over financial reporting. In this letter, we would tell you if there were any weaknesses or deficiencies in controls over financial reporting. And we go on in this letter to describe what deficiencies are and then to say that you have none. There are no deficiencies that we need to report in your controls over financial reporting. The next letter is the actual report on compliance with the federal programs. This letter also provides an opinion that says we have discovered no areas of non-compliance. So you are in compliance with all aspects of federal programs. Now, federal program auditing rotates. So in certain years you audit certain programs and then in the following years you audit other programs. So you're not auditing every program every year. But if you look on page 127 on item number 7, it shows you the actual programs that were compliance audited during this audit. Last thing, certainly not least, there's a letter from our firm in the back. You don't need to pull that out. I just want to let you know that it's a required letter. It has prescribed communication categories on it, and it's also there to let you know if there was a specific issue that was encountered during the audit. And we always say this, if there was an issue that had arisen to the nature of needing to be communicated to the board, you would not be hearing about it just right now. Okay, so that letter is a clean letter. There's no additional communication required to you in terms of any audit issues. So I appreciate you indulging me. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Can you tell me what a RSI is?
That's required supplementary information. Okay. If that's not what it is, that's what I think it is. I made it up, but it is.
Sounded right. Make a motion
Okay.
that the audit of the 2017 to 2018 annual financial statements performed by the firm of Kennemer Masters Lunsford LLC be approved as presented.
We have a motion made by Mr. Berry and a second by Ms. Carbone. Any further discussions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-4 and 0 against. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Georgiani and staff.
Yes.
Great job.
You bet.
All right. Number 2.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, consider to approve pay increase for bus drivers and budget amendment. Calling for that. We've discussed this at previous meetings, so I won't go through all that again, but in order to remain competitive, we recommend that we need a $1 increase to the hourly pay rate for all bus drivers. We started the year, as you heard earlier in the workshop, 13 drivers short. That's primarily because our hourly rate is not competitive. So we strongly recommend this mid-year adjustment to bus driver pay.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
That the Board of Trustees approve the recommendation to increase starting pay and current bus driver pay by $1 per hour for the 2018 to 19 school year and amend the budget to increase function 34 expenditures as presented.
Second.
Could I have a motion made by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. Murphy? Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor? All right, motion carries 7-4 and 0 against.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, we have a report on the campus accountability plans, which we call the CAP plans. And the reason that this is on the agenda, first of all, there's that new Senate Bill 1566 that talks about monitoring student performance by the board. But if you remember last month, we had you pass the legal requirement for the district and campus improvement plan objectives. But in reality, those are not our true working documents. Those are more compliance documents. What you'll gather tonight is how we are really working on student performance gains from a planning point of view. So what we've asked is from Pearland High School, Nyla Watson, whose office and personally supervises this whole approach with all of our campuses and the entire district. She recommended that we bring forth John Palumbo because of his outstanding work on his CAP plan for this year and in past years. So John, we're handing this over to you, and if you'd tell us about the CAP plans.
Fantastic, thank you.
You get tomorrow off.
Ma'am?
You get tomorrow off.
Am I getting tomorrow off? Is it paid, David? If it's paid, I'll take it off.
We've just seen a lot of you today, so.
Well, you know, I geek out over data, so,
Okay,
you
so
know,
this
I
is
could
your
probably
thing?
talk about this for 2 hours.
Start that
Sean said
timer.
I've only got an hour, so.
Sean, you don't listen to Sean.
I like the data too.
Start the timer.
Truly, though, this is probably one of the, I think, best things that we do as a district, especially from the C&I department and them leading it. It gives us opportunities to really look at our data and dig in and kind of figure out where are we good at, what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, how do we approach it. And it's truly a collaborative effort between us as a campus, C&I, advanced academics. There's a lot of discussions, and I'm going to talk about this hopefully in about 15 minutes. But this happens over days and weeks over the summer and even during the school year as we work through it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this here. So first, I'm going to talk about what our vision and purpose is. I think this drives the boat on everything that we do here at Pearland High School. Our focus is cultivating a culture of excellence that nurtures our students' empathy, education, and passion. That's our main focus, and that's our driving force on what we do and why we do everything every single day. So we start every meeting off with this when we talk about what are we trying to do for our kids as we look at anything with regards to either data or any kind of instructional or educational or extracurricular planning for our kids. This is a little bit of a summary of what the accountability plan kind of touches on, having us summarize, finding a summary of student assessment data from prior years, looking at key results on the campus and what we're trying to achieve. And I think the thing I love about it is we're looking for appropriately ambitious goals that we're looking to set for student growth. We don't try to do anything unrealistic. You know, typically we talk about, and I talk to our teams about, we want to look for 5% growth typically if we're not performing well in an area. We think that's realistic. Sometimes we outshine that, and we'll see a little bit of that with some of the results that I'll share with you today. And then strategies and also advancing progress for our students. So we kind of start out, and this is kind of a summary of our report card. I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief overview on this. If you look at the very far left where you have all the colors,
That kind of just talks about the domains, and that's where our report card grades are generated from, what we're looking at. Just to the right of that, you have the raw score. The state has a raw score, which with regards to what they give to campuses, but they convert that to a scale score because that's something a little bit more palatable for parent and public and teacher consumption even as well with that. So when you look at the scale score, that's what we will typically look at with regards to where's our grade landing at. And so I'll talk a little bit briefly, like in domain 1 STAR component, that's specifically looking at our masters, meets and approaches levels, and we scored an 85 there. College career military readiness, or what we call a CCMR, we scored at 92. Graduation rate, we got a grade of a 95. It's very interesting. That's the highest grade you can get, even though we had a 99.8 graduation rate. So that's just an interesting note for you to know when you're looking at that. When we look at the student progress measure, academic growth, that's targeting specifically kids from 8th grade math to Algebra 1. How are they performing with regards to their progress? Are they making progress? And then also our English 1 scores compared to our English 2 scores. In those areas, we scored a 79 in relative performance. I'll get a little bit more in depth in that. And Closing the Gaps specifically looks at how are we doing with all of our populations across our campus, and how are they performing compared to the state average of what they're looking at. And I'll talk a little bit about on how we attack that. That's a brief overview. I'm going to break it down a little bit further to kind of give you a little bit more information.
Well, John, would
Yes,
you
sir.
go back there and just show them the bottom right, which is your overall grade there?
Yes, thank you. So our overall grade was an 88, which was very good, not quite where we want to be. I believe that we're an A campus, and that's what we're striving to get to this year, and that's our focus. But we had an 88 as they didn't assign a letter grade, but I think everybody can equate that to being a B, and so that's where we're at right now. So overall, we're doing very well. There's some things that we're going to specifically target, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we've broken down our data and kind of looked at our programming and what did we develop from there. This is the Closing the Gaps report, so it kind of gives you just an overall picture. When you look at the far left, closer to the top, you have the reading that's in yellow, and then just below that, that's the math. And then when you look across, you see a bunch of Y's that are in green and N's that are in red in certain areas. So those red areas are areas that we want to focus on trying to get better in those areas, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But when you look at the number above those the target number, that's the average that the state would expect you to be hitting. So some of them we're not very far off. Some of them we've got a little bit of work to do, and so I'll talk a little bit more about that specifically a little later on. So how do we use the data? There's a lot of things that we do with the data. We do instructional reviews and adjustments. How are we instructionally delivering information? How are we teaching our kids? How are we assessing our kids? We also provide trainings for our teachers. We look at, do we need to do Region 4 trainings? Do we need CNI training? Advanced academics coming in? Do we need to do specific coaching? And so we look at those things. We develop staff development and professional development through it. We set our team goals. That's one of our biggest focuses. And then we also do personnel review. Always take some time to individually look at how are our teachers doing compared to each other, also in the district, and trying to figure out how do we help those teachers grow or get better in their areas with regards to the data that we see. And we also try to use that data relative to what kids they're teaching. Are they teaching kids that are inclusion kids? Are they teaching advanced kids? And kind of looking at that information relative to their counterparts and developing plans for those teachers to help them out so that we can perform at the highest level that we can. So domain 1, to give you a little bit more of a specific, this is one of the areas that we are focused on right now, specifically in our STAR component. So when we look at our STAR component, it's 40% of our grade. We scored an 85 in that area. One of the things that we learned, it was a big aha, we have, is it John Fezden? Is that his name? From Lead Forward, that comes out every year and kind of gives us an update on what we're looking at with regards to how to attack the game that the state has put out in front of us. And one of the biggest ahas that we discovered was this. So what they do is they take your percentage basically of all your areas. If you're in approaches, meets, and master's levels, all those, they add them all together, they divide by 3, and that's how they end up getting your scale score. Now, when we started looking at it, and we discovered is the more kids, if we have them hitting masters, they're counting in the meets and the approaches level. And so our big focus and our big push for our teachers and kids is how do we push more kids to the master's level, because then that gives us a bigger score. And we'll score higher in this area specifically. So specifically, we're looking at right now, we scored a 62% last year in meets and 24% in masters, and that's in overall all of our tests that we offered. Some areas we were higher than others. But we're starting to look at, okay, how do we push our kids instructionally? What do our assessments look like to move those numbers up? And so that's kind of how we instructionally look at that piece. So a little bit more in depth with that. Some things that we're really focused on and we're really working on as a team across the campus is common assessments. And what that means is basically our teachers are giving the same assessments among all of their teachers. And then we're reviewing that data, and we're sitting down, we're looking at the data and saying, how are you doing on this? So our teachers can have good instructional conversations about, my kids did not do well on this TEK, your kids did well. What did you instructionally do that you feel like your kids got that? And so having that true, deep conversation with each other to help them perform to the best of their ability. Also targeted tracking of our students. We're really tracking our kids and finding out where are they performing, where are they performing coming in, and then how are we performing moving forward. And then the team planning and instructional discussions, we're constantly talking about new instructional strategies. Are we meeting them at the right rigor level? Are our assessments meeting the TEKs? And assessing the right TEKs. So we're really analyzing that kind of stuff deeply. And we're starting to see some pretty big gains in some areas with that work that we're doing. The CCMR piece is 40%. Another 40% of it, it's a 92. But the thing that we've narrowed down is we need to increase our AP and TSI passing rates. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. College career military readiness. A kid, by the time they graduate college, they've got to basically check one of these 8 boxes. Score 3 or higher on the AP test, TSI criteria, so they're scoring an appropriate level on the reading and math in either SAT, ACT, or TSI scores. Dual credit courses and meeting so many hours, associate's degree, industrial-based certifications, completing the IEP work, enlisting in the U.S. Armed Forces or the CTE coherent sequence. Through the data and what we've looked at, we've really narrowed our focus. Because of the fact that we've looked at our data, we have hardly at Pearland High School, because we're not Turner, we don't have the associate's program, so we don't have a ton of kids graduating with that, so they're not checking that box as much. With regards to industrial-based certifications, we have certifications, but the state is saying we're only looking at a certain number, and we don't have a ton of those on our campus. Last year, we had 33 kids that met that criteria out of our 750 graduates. Completing IEPs, Armed Forces, we had about 20 kids. And then CTE coherent sequence, we only had about 50 kids. So we're really looking to find out where can we get more bang for our buck. So our focus has been how do we get more kids into AP courses, and also those kids that are in AP courses, how do we push more to get 3s? And then also we're really pushing to find a new TSI tutorial program for our kids that may not be doing well on SAT or ACT. And we're developing a tutorial program for our kids, seniors specifically, to get into those courses or that tutorial program and really work to try to get them to pass the TSI test. And that's just a benefit to kids, ultimately. That gives them an opportunity to get into a junior college without having to take any remedial courses and show that they're college ready. So those are some things that we've discovered after looking at the CCMR data that we've received through this process of the CAP plan. I talked to them mostly about that. So the other thing that we've talked about is when we look down in domain 2, there's 2 pieces to it. One of them is what we call academic growth. And basically that looks at 2 things. It looks at our 8th graders or 9th graders that have 8th grade scores in math, and then how did they do in Algebra 1 compared to the year before. And then we also look at how did they do in English 1 to English 2. And really, when I say progress is 0, we don't want any kids scoring below what they scored the year before. So if a kid made an 88%, we want them to make an 88% this year. If they made a 33%, we want them to make a 33% or higher. Ultimately, our goal is we want them to make as high as they possibly can and move them forward. But that's something else that we have to cognitively be aware of. And I'll show you a little bit of data of how that impacts you. I kind of summarized that there. So what I've done here is this is kind of a breakdown. If you look at the far left where it says spring 2017, that was kids that scored. That's results from their 8th grade year. So 68 kids where it does not meet the year before. And then when we look at the Algebra 1 spring piece, when we're looking at the top column where you see the 17, we had 17 kids that did not score the same score that they made the year before. Also, the 39 kids in the next column, same thing. So we start looking at that piece, and this was a big aha for our teachers this year. And we spent a lot of time on how do we develop a way to start tracking our kids to make sure that they're doing well with it. And we think we've seen some success because we're seeing some progress on just benchmarks and that kind of stuff. And so it helped us kind of narrow our focus because when we started looking at it, we had about 160 kids. When you look at towards the bottom here, we had about 160 kids total that did not meet the progress that we would wanted them to meet from the year before.
Are you able to track by teacher as well?
Yes.
So
Yes.
not only the student performance, but
Yes,
basically
yes.
the class and how.
And I will say this though, it was pretty even. So we felt like it was more of a systematic issue, and that was good data to find.
Right.
You know, we felt like it was more of a systematic issue, and how are we approaching to the monitoring of this? And we feel like it was more of an educational thing for our teachers versus anything. So we think we're going to see some improvement in this area specifically.
You know, one of the hard things for high schools is that you live or die by the sword in the sense that they can only measure year-to-year progress in 2 areas, Algebra 1, 8th grade math to Algebra 1 and English 1 to English 2. No other set of classes has a requirement that goes from 8th grade to 9th grade or 9th grade to 10th. So you got to zero in on these 2 areas. And, of course, this particular thing, you're measuring kids who didn't take Algebra 1 in 8th grade.
Yes.
So, John, are you also looking at, can you, and you can speak to this too, Dr. Watson, can you see from like feeder pattern from southwest and east?
Yes, we do look at that as well, and
So
we'll
you can
have some of
see
those. Yes, we have
that
some of those
dynamic
conversations.
as well as like what
vertical
we need
alignment.
so what
Yes,
we
ma'am.
need to do to help them so they're successful in high school.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we do that a lot too as well. Is just kind of looking at feeder patterns. Are we seeing gaps in certain areas and having conversations with CNI, and they work with our feeder patterns and having those conversations as well. English, this is another snapshot. Now, if you look at the total is much larger with this, but remember about 200 to 250 of our Algebra 1 kids, they take it in 8th grade. So that's why there's a little bit of disparity in the number. But again, a pretty decent number of kids didn't meet the mark here. And when we looked at teachers and we looked at different ways, it was pretty even, averaging out-wise. And so we feel like it was a systematic issue. And so it was really, this is new this year that John Fesden provided us from Lead Forward. And it was a big aha for a lot of our teachers to say, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't notice that. And so there's a different focus on it moving forward. And so that's kind of helped us just programmatically when we're looking at that. So with progress measure, we tell our kids there's only one way, right? There's no going backwards. And so that's kind of a way that we kind of preach to our teachers. Look at it. What did your kids score last year? We want them to score that or higher than that. We typically set goals for the kids. Again, 5% is our benchmark. If you scored 33% last year, we want you scoring 38 this year. If you scored 85, we want you scoring 93. And so that's kind of our benchmark and how we try to push our kids to also set goals with those kids individually. So like I mentioned, we were talking about intentionally tracking some of that data and then tracking all common assessments and benchmarks for each assessment. We've got huge data sheets that basically our teachers are sitting down writing down every time they take a test, what was the percentage, what was the percentage, what was the percentage. So we can see, is there anomalies, or are we seeing trends with kids and they're not trending to be meeting that mark that we want. And so that's just a visual that we use and work with our teachers on. So this is an interesting rating system here, but I like it. It's Domain 2, it's Part B, it's your relative performance. And so what the state has done is they've taken Domain 1, which I talked about with the CCMR and student accountability piece, and they've taken those 2 components and said, what did you score just out of those 2 scores? And I'll show you physically, or I'll show you in just a moment what that looks like. And then how did you perform relative to other campuses with economically disadvantaged campuses that are close to you? So more of a reflection of where did you fall on that grid. And so last year we scored a 77 on it. We definitely think we're going to score better on that because we've got some intentionality there. That score came from basically they took the STAR component, added it to the CCMR, divided it by 2, and they got 61, which is the one that's just below that, and then they scaled it up to what they felt was a scale score of a 7, or what they determined a scale score of a 77. So Pearland High School, we scored a 77. This kind of gives you a visual of it. If you look at the bottom left corner where it says economically disadvantaged, last year we reported 25.7% economically disadvantaged on our campus, and the range in which we were compared to was 25.1 to 26. So if we'd had 0.4 more, we'd have had a different range. Our score may have been a little bit different. We may have actually gotten a B if we had 0.4 more economically disadvantaged kids. But that just kind of gives you a visual and a picture of how does that score come out. With that, we think with the work that I talked about previously, this will naturally take care of itself with the intentionality of what we're going to be doing for the STAR component in the meets and masters level, and then also our focus on AP scores for CCMR and TSI scores. So closing the gap, that was another piece that I was talking about where the state takes those areas and says this is where you comparatively should be scoring. So I'll just kind of work from left to right, looking at the math area. In whites, we scored a 58%, and the measure was 59%, so we missed it, and that was basically one kid. Some of these populations are very small, so it's only 1 to 4 kids. With our Asian population, that's 3 kids. So if we'd had 3 more kids, that would have hit that measure. But we worry about those areas, but typically we worry about if we've got several vertical no's, which we see on the special ed and the ELL side. So we're looking at those areas specifically. ELL, we're specifically targeting some sheltered classes and how we schedule our kids. So we're intentionally scheduling those kids in with specific teachers now in our STAR areas. Math and reading in particular, and trying to help them move forward in that area. And then special ed, we're also doing the same thing. We're really working to make sure that we do a good job of partnering the inclusion teacher, that's a really great inclusion teacher, along with our good math teachers to meet the needs of those kids, and then also working with Dr. Nixon and their team to continue to find new strategies and new ways to meet the needs of those kids. With the graduation piece, where we're at 82.8%, that's 5 kids. And so some of these, when you look at it, it's just a handful of kids and missing in just small areas. And so we're trying to be a little bit more focused and intentional. And so this is some of the stuff that I mentioned with regards to that, but we're focused on improvements in the ELL and SPED areas, intentional scheduling, and specifically scheduling our STAR classes for our EL students. And trying to meet their needs specifically and working through that. So that's something that we're looking to do. Some other stuff that comes out of this as well is we look at our demographics and kind of look at Pearland High School as a whole. Now this was done a couple months ago. We were at 3080. I think we're running about 3065 right now enrollment-wise. So not a huge shift, but this kind of gives you an overall picture of numbers-wise where we're at. Out of our 3,080 kids, we have 839 economically disadvantaged. So just a visual graphic. Our white population is at 40%, Hispanics are at 37%, African American we're at 14%, Asian we're at 5%, 2 races we're at 2%, and then American Indian we're at 1%. So it gives you kind of a picture. I love our campus because we're so culturally diverse. It's great. I love the fact that we've got such a diverse population, and it's fun to work with. When we did this report, we were at 27% economically disadvantaged. So from what I had mentioned before from last year, we've grown by about 1.5%, and I think we've increased a little bit more since then. So we're pushing almost 30% economically disadvantaged on our kids. So we're almost at about a third. So 1 out of every 3 of our kids are economically disadvantaged on average, or pretty close to that. Also, too, we look at our special populations and just to see where we're at. Special education, we're at 11.4% when I presented this to our C&I department. 504, we're at 7.8%, and our ELs are at 3.5%. We continue to see growth in all of these areas, honestly. Our special ed population has grown over the last few years with regards to that, and typically campuses around us, they're closer to 8% in the areas that I've looked. I've just kind of looked to see what is comparatively, how are we looking. So we're a little high on that end, and even with 504 in ELs, we're growing population. This gives you kind of just a overall picture of our special populations versus our general ed population. We're almost at 1 every 4 kids being in some kind of special population. And so that always brings its unique challenges, and we're continuing to find new ways to reach kids, and how do we continue to push these kids to achieve at the highest level, because I believe we can do it. And so we're continuing to push forward with that. So this is some ahas that came from this, and there's something else I'll add to this, but 2 years ago, Pearland High School, when I first got here, we were at 44% white, 33% Hispanic, and today we're 40% white, 37% Hispanic. So we're seeing a demographic shift at Pearland High School. And I talked to our staff about that as well, because we've got to be aware of that and cognizant of that, that our population is shifting, so making sure that we reach all of our kids and we're understanding of all of our kids with that. Economically disadvantaged, we're almost at 30%, but a big piece of that I discovered was 50% of our Hispanic population is economically disadvantaged, and that was a huge aha that I discovered actually this year, just doing some data diving and digging. And it just gives us a different perspective with that, and I found that because I was looking for how do we increase AP enrollment, so I kind of ran some data to kind of see AP-wise and dual credit-wise, what does our demographics look like in those classes? Are we fairly balanced? Are we not? We were running about 55% white. We were running about 15% African-American. Whites were a little bit heavy. African-American was about where our student population is, but our Hispanic population was about 15%. And so then I started asking the question, why? And then I asked them to run the economically disadvantaged stuff by demographic. And I discovered that 50% of our Hispanic population is economically disadvantaged. So now we're currently working on how do we reach those kids and encourage those kids, because we know we've got those kids that can get into those classes, and how do we get them into it and also prepare them for it as well. So that's a current project we're working on right now, and that's just a discovery of from the CAP plan. And then also 23% of our school is special populations. So some academic growth just through this process that we've seen over the last 2 years here at Pearland High School. Our Algebra 1 approaches rate has gone from 77% to 89%, so we've seen some significant growth in that area. Our meets has increased from 50 to 56%, and our masters increased specifically last year. We went up from 14% to 25% masters level. So we've seen some substantial growth in those areas with regards to the intentionality in the work we've been doing. Our English approaches, we've seen some growth this last year. We went from 71 to 76%, and 70 to 77%. So our teachers are doing a lot of great work there. And I think a lot of it's just a collaborative culture we continue to build on and working with each other, and also working with our CNI and advanced academics departments. Our meets rates increased respectively too as well, 2% and 4%. And our biology and U.S. histories have held steady the last couple of years. But we've got to focus on those two areas specifically. We'll want to move those master levels up in those areas because we feel like we can get that gain in those areas. So that's a focus that we have coming up. And just kind of wrap it up, just to kind of talk a little bit about the things that we've developed through the CAP plan. The intentional scheduling of students, really being focused in hand-picking and placing students in specific classes to make sure that we're meeting their needs. Targeted tutorial programs and pullouts. We use Euler Hour. That's one of our ways that we get to our tutorial programs and using our kids.
I just want to say something about that. John is the pioneer in that whole Euler Hour idea, and it has produced great results, and now it is being spread to other districts. Dawson has Eagle Hour.
Yes.
And it's just a really good thing. Kids can go to tutorials in an extended lunch hour and do other things that prior just weren't getting done.
Yeah, my kids take full advantage of it, so. And
some people thought we were crazy, but that's okay.
no, and I think that I know that you had
I
said
may
that
be a little crazy. That's all right, though.
there were some kinks last year that you managed to work through. So.
Yes. Well, it's about holding them accountable.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's a great incentive tool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
so, yeah.
doing great. They're doing a great job with it this year. So
Yeah.
hopefully we stay on track with that.
Yeah.
One of the things we're looking to do too is Star Blitz program. Typically, just so you know, and I'm sure Dawson does the same thing, about 2 to 3 weeks out before we go into STAR testing, we do what we call a blitz. Typically, we finish the curriculum, and now we're hitting big areas of where we know kids struggle. So in the past, we've only worked on in the classroom with the classroom groups. This year, our big focus is, and we haven't rolled it out yet because we haven't gotten to it, but our big focus is we're going to really look at analyzing every single student and saying, okay, what areas are students struggling with? And we're going to send kids to different teachers' classrooms during that period to work on that specific area. So if a kid's good at, say, graphing lines, we're not going to send you to that tutorial, but we may have a group of kids in that area. But if you're struggling with inequalities, we're going to send you to that tutorial. And so we're going to really be intentional, because that's going to be, I feel like that's how we're going to move our meets and masters kids up, because we're hitting all of the kids, and it's not just targeting our lower kids. That's really what the new accountability system does. It forces you to do that. So that's something that we're going to roll out. We haven't gotten to it yet, and so I'm hoping for a lot of success in that area as well. Also, sending staff to Region 4 for STAR strategies. We've gotten a lot of bang for our buck out of that. Our teachers have come back with a lot of good tools, and so we invest in that PD for our teachers and sending them to those trainings. Again, ensuring that our assessments are aligned to the TEKS. That's been a big thing that we've been harping on in our campus this year is when you're giving a kid a test, is it being measured by the TEKS on the STAR test? That's a huge thing that we're looking at, and it is at the right level. Is it at a higher enough level and rigor level? And so we're seeing our benchmark data. We've seen a lot of growth in our benchmark data in all of our areas. I just got our English data today, and we're looking really, really good. We're trending up. We're trending a little bit higher than we did last year. Biology, we've seen some significant growth as well with our benchmark data already. And so I feel like we're making some positive movement academically with the intentionality with regards to our team efforts. Continuously reviewing our common assessments and how instruction is delivered. We're constantly having those conversations. Set team goals. You know, I preach to our team, we've got to be competitive. We need to be the best. That's what we want to do and what we want to be. And so we continue to do that. C&I, but I accidentally left advanced academics. During the summer, we also sit down and we invite C&I out and advanced academics to review STAR results by teacher. In addition to that, we do the same thing with AP results. We invite them out. We have kind of tough conversations sometimes about, do we have the right person on the right seat on the right bus? Do we need to provide more training for that person? And really analyzing that information. That goes into that personnel review. I'm gonna end on this, and this is probably the proudest thing that I think we've done so far. Something we call the Instructional League. It was built off of the Justice League. Our team has come up with a way to use personnel as instructional coaches. We've identified some of our best teachers. And so we are targeting them to go in and specifically work with teachers that we feel need to grow in certain areas, and say they are working with them throughout the year, going in there either watching and observing and giving feedback, modeling lessons, things of that nature. In addition to that, we just this last week did instructional walks where we got subs for our brand new teachers and allowed them to go into some of our master teacher classes and just be able to take notes and take tools back. And at the end of the day, they debriefed for about 2 to 3 hours about what did you learn, how can you use that, how can you implement that. And the teachers that they observed were in that room so they could talk to them about what was your thought process behind this and that kind of stuff. And it was very, very powerful. It's probably one of the things that I'm most excited about. It was our infant initial run this last week, but we got a lot of positive feedback from our teachers. And we're really, really excited about that. But we also opened the doors to all of our teachers and said, hey, any teacher that wants to go, we call them spotlight teachers. Anybody that wants to go see one of our spotlight teachers this week, here's the schedule. Feel free to go in. And we had teachers galore popping into classrooms, watching, and we went through math, English, science, and social studies. We had those on all different days. We also highlighted technology as well, how our teachers using technology, because I think that's probably the most powerful thing teachers can get, is to see a colleague actually doing it in action, and then it creates and sparks that interest and sparks that conversation with them. So that's probably one of the most powerful things that we've come up with at Pearland High School that we're really, really excited about, especially after the results we've gotten recently. before I close, since I've talked a lot about academics, but we've also accomplished a lot of things extracurricular-wise at Pearland High School so far this year. So I just want to highlight a little bit of that. Our band has done great this year so far. They got first in the area in UOI marching competition and moved on to state. They've also earned the honor from 2020 to go march in the Rose Bowl parade, which is a huge accomplishment and testament to those kids and those directors. Volleyball teams made the playoffs. Football had an undefeated winning record this regular season, and district champs, and we're ready to move on to the playoffs, and hopefully we come home with a win. Our JROTC does competitions all the time. They took first place recently at the second annual Kima Salute competition, and then our Oiler cheer team, they've qualified for nationals with a first and second place finish in the regional competition in 2 different categories. So we're excited at Pearland High School. You know, I think all of this, the academics and the extracurriculars, makes the whole child, and so we're excited with what we're doing and how we're moving forward. So, any questions? It wasn't an hour. I'm sorry, Sean.
That's all right. I got one question.
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of thought and a lot of collaboration within the school as it relates to testing. How much time do you think your teachers and staff spend, focusing on this testing as a percentage?
I'll tell you this: our teachers meet once a week. That's purposeful time. That's not counting time outside of that. I mean, I can name several, like my chemistry team, my biology team. They're meeting pretty regularly. I mean, almost every day during their conference period. We build in common conference times for our teachers. The intentionality of this kind of stuff, we bring teams up over the summer. We get star results. I send my APs home in June. I kind of do some analysis and get some thoughts rolling in my head. And then when we come back in July, we spend a good amount of time talking about where are we at, what are we doing, what have we done that's making a difference. Our benchmarks for English, I was just in a meeting today and talking to the team, and we've seen some pretty significant improvement from last year, and I asked them, what are we doing differently, and they said, close reading. And I said, what's close reading? I have no idea. I know it's not holding the paper closer to your head, but they said they're intentionally talking to the teachers and the kids and teaching them how to read the question and highlight the important stuff that they're looking for. So if they're looking for, say, imagery, and they say you're looking for what's the imagery in line 1, they're teaching them how to go back and mark line 1 and say imagery, and they say they think that intentionality of helping them find where the answer is in the passage is making a difference for our kids. And that's something that was just recently discussed and developed, and that the conversation has all year long. I mean, this presentation does not do justice to the intentionality of what we do and then how we end up putting things into the CAP plan. The CAP plan truly helps us articulate what we're doing, but also analyze what we're doing, which I really appreciate and like. We get a chance to say, is this working? If it's not working, we need to do something different. If it's working, can we make it better? And so it's just a great process. I really enjoy it.
But the classroom time is pretty much 100% focused on these TEKs.
Yes. When you say classroom time, you're talking about the team planning between the teachers?
No, I was talking about the actual curriculum time.
Yes, that's our focus. That's our focus. We're taking a mind shift and really having crucial conversations about when you're writing a test or you're measuring on a test, it needs to be measuring the TEK. It's not because it was your favorite thing or thing that you loved. It needs to truly be measuring a TEK. And so that's a shift that we're having, and in several of our areas, we're having some major gains in those areas right now, and so we're excited about that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mr. Palumbo, can you, there was no numbers on here, but there was a slide right before the CCMR slide where you talked about the criteria for the CCMR, and you had started to talk about the AP portion, and one of my questions was, does the number of AP tests taken go back one more before this one? Yeah. So you had said that you started talking about AP and the fact that our AP was down just a little bit, or that particular number. Does the number of tests taken and not passed affect it, or is it just the number of tests AP that is passed?
So the way CCMR works, the question the state's basically asking is, did the kid check one of these boxes?
Wait. Okay.
And so,
hang on, maybe it's one more before this. I'm sorry.
I think that's the one. And I might have not stated it clearly enough. One of the things that we discovered, I believe, and I'm going to throw the number out, but I think it was about 100 kids or so that did not make out of the kids that didn't check the box, didn't make a 3 on, they may have checked the box somewhere else. So they may not have checked the box on AP, but they may have checked the box on CTE, let's say. So what we're starting to look at is well, if we've got 100 kids that aren't meeting a 3, how do we pull some of those 100 kids up to get to a 3, because then they're checking that box, because some of them didn't check the box at all. We had about, out of our 750 graduates, I think it was about 250 that didn't meet the CCMR measure any of these. But where we started breaking down the data, we only had a handful in those other areas. The areas that we saw a significant amount of kids that we could touch were dual credit, TSI passing either SAT, ACT, or TSI test, or making a 3 on the AP scores. So we're really, so.
Let me simplify it. I think, if I understand Sean's question, participation rate helps, because the more kids you've got taking an AP, the higher the number of those kids which may check box number 1 and get a 3. So it doesn't measure participation directly.
It does, but I guess my question, that is very helpful, kind of helps along with that. But does the number of attempts, if they don't pass the AP, or does okay? So that doesn't affect.
That doesn't count against you. So
Okay.
if I've got a kid that takes 4 AP tests and doesn't score a 3 on any of them, it doesn't count against you.
But it doesn't help.
But it doesn't help you in them meeting the CCMR criteria. So we started, and so that's, and I talked a lot about our STAR classes, but we've had conversations with our AP teachers. How are we tracking our AP kids? Where are they scoring? How are you moving kids that you feel maybe making a 2 on the test? How are we moving them to 3s? Those kind of conversations. So it's truly almost a whole campus. It's truly a campus conversation. You know, we're talking about all of our areas too, because we talk about how every single area helps the other area. If we're all doing the TECA-aligned common assessments, that practice will help across the board, because it translates with the higher level of rigor and the expectation for the kids. And so that's the movement we're starting to make with our groups.
If you move into the AP and you have higher level of participation, even if you're not making the 3, the TSI is going to be those kids, the rigor at which those AP courses are taught is going to enforce number 2 almost by nature of its own.
Yes.
So you're doing kind of dual, you're targeting 2 buckets at the same time.
You know what I always say about Pearland High School? He said we have 3,080 students there. Just think about that. That's bigger than the average town or city in Texas. He's basically running a small city. With all
Love
those
my city.
teachers.
Are you the mayor?
I'm just the principal, sir.
Do you? And my second follow-up to that was under the industry-based certification. Is it just one certification, meaning if they just got that one?
No, if they get any certification under what TEA has recognized, so there's there's several hundred that Perkins certifications,
Right.
but TEA
It
only
has to be
recognizes
72 or something like that.
something like that.
TEA recognizes 77 that are the courses that are aligned with the Texas Workforce Commission. But when you look at the CCMR codes, they pulled certifications last. The scores come in late, so they pull everything else and then certifications. So when John says he only has 33 kids, he has a lot more kids that got certifications, but they met CCMR by some other qualification.
Before, okay, they went on the line, and then. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation,
They
Mr.
actually go
Palumbo.
down the road.
Have-
They do 1, 2, all the way down. Okay.
They're just looking for one. When they pull the first one, they're done.
I have a few questions. The first slide that you gave was a quote that you said you talked about in teacher meetings, and the first line was about the culture of things, the culture of creating the student with passion, academics, empathy. Thank you. Have you seen a change in culture between teachers and then secondarily students with the increase in rigor and kind of pushing the data and asking these kinds of questions?
Yes, the biggest aha we've had is with our biology team, because we've really focused on we've got to move our masters up. We feel like just the way the tests are written. So to give you a little bit of background, let me give you a little bit of information, then I'll answer that. For the English, both of the English tests, there's some challenges with the higher pass rate. They're both at about 60%, when the others are between 40 and 45%. In addition to that, there's some subjectivity to the English test, because there's an essay that's graded, and we've looked at essays when we've gotten them back, and there's some discrepancy between the scores. So that's a little bit of, we try to move that area, and we're going to continue to try to move that area, but that's a little bit tougher. Our algebra area moving up our masters is a little bit tougher because a lot of our advanced kids have already taken algebra 1 at the junior high, so they're not counting in our scores. And so to really move that masters up in that area is really tough. And to show an I think it was 11% growth from 2 years ago to last year was a big jump for us in that area, and that's some intentionality of our teachers and their work they're doing. So we really focused on how do we
Because
increase.
If I understand correctly, those kids are going to be a lot of heavy inclusion classes.
Yes.
Because your advanced academics is kind of already pulled out of those
Yes,
numbers. So that
yes.
population of that 25% is greater in
Yes.
those. Okay.
Yes. And so we've really focused on our biology and U.S. history teams to really push that. You know, I'm looking for, I told them 5%, but I'm anticipating a 10% growth. That's what I would like to see in those areas, because I think we can do it if we do it intentionally in the right way. Our biology team is truly seeing some ahas this year. They've really embraced the intentionality of writing their exams and making sure that it is measuring what TEKs are being measured and being measured on the STAR exam. And for the first time in a long time, we are neck and neck with Dawson academically in the benchmarks that we've seen. And we've seen some significant growth in our masters and meets levels in biology in particular. And so, yes, there's some
So what I
ahas
hear
and
you
some
saying
movement. And
is
the
you
kids,
have a lot more group cohesion
Yes.
between the teachers, and they're working more as a team versus individually in the classrooms working on their students.
I would say we've always worked as a team. I think we didn't. The struggle that we had was the intentionality with really looking at we were looking at every single question and saying, does that measure the TEK? If it doesn't, every activity we look at, is that measured by a TEK? If it's not, we're not doing it. And so that intentionality with doing that is really showing some gains and growth. Now, we did have some pushback from kids because of the rigor level going up. They weren't used to that.
What I was asking before.
But they've adjusted. From the first benchmark to the last common assessment, we've seen some increase in growth from our kids. And so it's coming. The kids adjust. You just got to set the bar. I'm a big believer. Set the bar. The kids will get there. We'll get them there. And so we're seeing some movement. It's exciting.
So that leads me kind of my second question. Is there any intangibles that are interfering with the educational growth or opportunities at PHS? Like anything that you're seeing systematically that you're needing more support with?
No, I mean, I would say
Behaviorally or
the
otherwise?
C&I department is fantastic. We pick up the phone, and I mean, we've got specialists that will show up sometimes that day. Teachers are requesting stuff from our specialists, and they show up.
So no kind of with the higher economically disadvantaged, no significant, I kind of think of it as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are those kids kind of getting their basic needs met enough that you feel like they're getting there and ready to be learning sort of
Yes.
thing? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
I would say one challenge that I've been hearing about the last week or so for PHS, along with other places, is we have the feeling that the Texas Medical Center is basically telling parents, if you want good special ed services for your kids,
Yes.
put them in Pearland ISD. And so we've been working on specific problems with PHS over the last week about kids coming in with severe issues and needing to properly man that.
Yes. I mean, when I look comparatively, and I started looking at different districts around us, and they're averaging roughly 8%, we're 4% higher than that. And so it brings its challenges, but we're up for the challenge. Our teachers are all on board and in it. And it's a collaborative effort, not only with our regular teachers, but our inclusion teachers working together.
I just
but-
can't.
Well, you do get, for the portion of the year that they're here, you get a higher funding per student, but it's nowhere near. Lisa and myself and David have been talking over the last week about additional personnel units in order to handle, in some cases, a kid who almost needs full-time one staff member assigned to them and them only.
That's just recently been an influx?
It's been gradually happening since I've been there. I can't speak to prior to me being there, but I would say since I've been there, I think 2 years ago we were about like 9.5%, 9.8%. And so just in 2 years, we've seen almost a 2% growth.
So it's kind of that scenario
in
when
that
people
area.
find out that you're a good district
they
for their
come here.
kids as far as special
It's
needs.
word
They're
of
like,
mouth. We've had
we're going to
parents
move there
say,
because they can take care of
We
our,
hear that y'all do a great job taking care of kids, and we want our kids to be here. And it's a good problem to have, because, that means we're doing right by kids. And so,
bring them.
The number one thing that you keep hearing, the word that he's used the most here tonight is intentionality. And that is really what I think is pointing to success for him. You know, I wish I had this on a chart, but a Venn diagram that I've seen in the past is the overlap between the tested curriculum, the taught curriculum, and the written curriculum. And that's what he's after. He's trying to make, you know, the TEKS are the rules. What Texas says you shall teach. And he's matching that to what is tested and to the written curriculum that goes with it.
Yeah, we tell our teachers, you don't get to determine what you teach, because that's dictated by the state. You get to dictate how you teach it. You know, and so we're really starting to embrace that thought process to, you know, kind of understand that these are the TEKS and this is what we're going to teach. How you teach it, that's really up to you as a team or as an individual teacher. And so it's been great. And, you know, I work with a great team, and it happens with a lot of great people on our campus here at Central Office. The work that we're doing doesn't happen without everybody. So.
So is this like this document, the CAP, is it a work in progress? Or do you have to turn it into?
Yeah, well, we typically have, it's an annual process for us, which typically do sometime in October. We present to say, hey, this is what we're doing and how we're attacking these areas. These were areas that we identified to be weak in, and so this is what we're going to do to try to attack this and move forward in this. But we do adjust through the year. I mean, it's not set in stone. You know, if we sit there and we're looking at it and we say we had this plan and it's not working, we scrap it and come up with a different plan and work on it. So it's a work in progress throughout the year, but it's more of a guiding document to say, okay, what are you intentionally in focus? What is your focus for this year to kind of get us kicked off for the school year, and then we monitor as we go and adjust as needed.
I just want to add that when John is talking about planning, the thing that they're really working on at PHS is making a real difference is purposeful planning. Like Dr. Kelly was saying, they're meeting weekly, they're targeting the TEKS, they're looking student by student and expecting every student to make progress, no one to pass backwards. We may have kids that pass, but they're not making a year's growth. So they're really looking at every student making progress and not falling further behind by not being at higher grade levels.
And this is the program, the CAP program that happens at every school across our
Mhm.
district.
This is a local product that we developed. This is the 8th year. And we physically sit out in my office, and Noel and Ellen Akers and I sat down in summer. We went through the accountability system and put every measure in, and we update it every year. And we just go through step by step and figure out what our campuses need, and we tweak it every summer. We send out a template, and then they fill it in, and then they physically come in the room, and we have like almost a hearing. And their assistant superintendent is there, special ed is there, Susanna's been coming from bilingual. Technology comes, and they actually talk through their process. We review it, we give feedback. Sometimes we give additional funding, other ways that we can support with personnel, with materials and supplies, whatever they need to make this program work.
Yeah, Mr. Pillum, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the effort that went into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've often said that, you know, I want to see improvement across all our campuses, right? And I appreciate what you put together here and the way you're working it to bring about that. I know you want to, obviously, you know, you're oiler number one, right? So I know.
Yes,
what
I want to be
wanna
the
see.
best.
Yes, I know you
I'm
do.
slightly competitive. My boss may attest to that.
Good deal. No, I really applaud that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And you know, the key thing you said is if a child's making 33, we want that child to make 34. That kid's not going to make 90, but he can make 34, or he can make 35 if we just increase our expectations for that child. So that's the real goal.
And what's exciting to me is if this is representative of everything that's happening across our district, then that's super exciting.
Every principal does it. The month of October is every principal on a daily schedule.
Let me just ask about the AP deal. You know,
Mhm.
we talked about stress on students and whatnot, but I'm a huge fan of what the district does is making the AP classes available to making them widely available, right? But how do you kind of identify kids who are not in AP
Good
that
question.
might be good candidates?
So the PSAT test that we give gives AP predictor data, and by course, and so you may have different standards for different courses, and so we go through that. So we're waiting until I think it comes out in January. When we get in January, we will start looking at it right before course selection, and we will identify a group of kids and saying, hey, we looked at your AP data. We think you've got potential, even if they're on the border. You know, if they just didn't quite make the cut, but they're just a little bit below, bring those kids in, and we intentionally have conversations with those kids, and we have conversations. Typically, we bring in an AP teacher to kind of give them some information about what that course is like, those types of things, and then also talking with APs, some counselors, things of that nature to kind of encourage those kids, hey, challenge yourself. Because studies and data show any kid that even just takes an AP course, their likelihood to be successful in college is greatly improved. I believe 3 times greater chances of graduating college. And so our goal is just to try to get more kids exposed to that, even if they don't make a 3. If you make a 2, truly College Board says if you make a 2, you're college ready. And so even if we can get kids just to get to a 2, but you're getting exposed to that rigor level and the expectation and just the skills that you learn in the AP courses is just a huge benefit for our kids. And so that's another intentional thing that we're looking to do this coming year. Just another thing to share too, you know, we've started a new national merit program where we're looking at some of our top kids and we're cohorting those kids into homerooms, and also develop some tutorials for those kids prior to the PSAT to kind of prepare them as well as best as they can, because I believe we've got more than 2 national merits on our campus at Pearland High School with 3,000 kids. And so we intentionally pulled a specific section of our 11th graders and started working on some tutorials with those kids to try to get them in there and to hopefully improve their scores as well. To not only get the recognition, but for them to get the honor of being a national merit and all the scholarship opportunities that they get as well with that. So that's another thing we've developed that wasn't directly related to this, but something else that we're working on at Pearland High School too.
The way I like the way you approach the whole AP part, because you're not saying that we want every kid in AP because we want to maximize that. You're reaching the kids at their level, you're pushing them, you're challenging them, but it's not that we got to have AP. We got to fill the AP classes just because.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate reaching the kids at their level and pushing them as much as you can. I agree with you. If you set an expectation, the kids will meet it, and I think they all need to be challenged. Right? If we can bring them up to their highest level, then we've done our job.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure our team too, even if they don't meet it, but they're just falling short of it, it's higher than if you set the expectation down here.
Right.
And so it's really about pushing the kids and helping them grow, and that's our focus.
Aren't you guys amazed at how much principals have to know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just the principal.
Yeah.
And now he has to be up in 2 minutes to be at the early start time.
Yeah.
I tried, man. I tried.
You know. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Palumbo.
sir. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Madam President, the next report, quarterly investment report, is there for your reading pleasure. The interest rates have crept up a little bit, so we have benefited from that, and also that we've widened our investments with Texpool Prime and Class, and that has earned us a little bit more interest. So I don't have anything further to say unless you do. That's just a written report.
Nope.
And then
Questions?
Final report is on the Pearland ISD strategic plan. You may remember that in May, I think it was, I sent you all via email an update, but the board asked for me to include that in the board agenda, and so I went ahead and took the opportunity, since it's been about a half a year since then, to update it again. And if you went to that link and looked at it, all the comments in red are a November update. Hope that wasn't confusing, but just sort of shows chronologically some of the progress.
This is you updated the goals and things too that we
Yes,
have
ma'am.
changed. I see that. So
I did appreciate. I did read the plan, but I noticed in there had again the update we had talked about in being more inclusive in the AP pay and bringing some of the other teachers in for incentive. That was updated in the strategic plan. So I appreciate that.
And we'll be coming back to you, we hope, in December to show you. You remember you asked for specific tweaks to the incentive plan for CTE pay and stuff like that. So I know Ellen Akers and the department there is working on that.
So I have a few comments here that I alluded to earlier. As I read through this, and again, this is my first taste of this really as a new board member, but one of the things I noticed right away is that, and I kind of talked about earlier that I'm very data-driven. My whole training and curriculum was based on data. we do very good academically looking at the data that supports everything that we do. And I applaud everyone that has contributed to this document because it's a very well-rounded document with lots of details. I don't want any of my comments to be taken as insult or injury to anything that's here. I guess I just, everything that was about the extras for a student was sort of written as a qualitative statement about things that may touch a specific student, but we really don't have a measure of how it's impacting the student in and of itself. So like United for Kids, awesome, amazing. We have tons of community buy-in. There are people here, but I don't really know how that's translating into students in our classroom. And it would be, and I don't know, I don't have the answer necessarily about how that's measured. But when I think about a world-class district or my view of a world-class district, I think about how do I give this to someone else in a partner district so that they can then replicate that or make that impact. What was that?
For United for Kids?
About how it's impacting kids directly? Okay.
And first, I need to give kudos and credit because this was Dr. Kelly's
Sure.
brainchild. You know, he 5 years ago, said, the left hand doesn't know necessarily what the right hand's doing, and we need to bring everybody to one table together in our community for the benefit of our kids and our family. We've built a network is what we've done. And just yesterday, I was notified of a kid whose family's gas has been turned off, whose water's about to be turned off, behind on their bill, etc. I send out an email, and within minutes, I have something taken care of for this family.
Right.
Last spring, I had Susan Holloway let me know of a family who was homeless and got housing,
Right.
but they had 3 teenage kids and needed beds. I timed it. I called Dr. Kelly. Within 5 minutes, I had 3 beds for those kids. It's things like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about because all of those are qualitative stories that we can tell, but we don't have a place that we're tracking the data to say, look at the implication that this has in a very tangible way that we can then, it just speaks to the
power of
we're
it.
doing amazing things in the district that are outside the academic realm that are above and beyond that aren't truly reflected because there's not a source of
Some of it's hard to measure, but the first thing that occurs to me when you talked about it was our junior high counselors, in order to make a pitch to us and to y'all for additional counselors, did this great job of chronicling the number of people that were coming their way with different types of issues. And so I suppose there might be ways to establish like a baseline of how many kids are coming forward and how many kids are getting treated and that sort of thing. Hadn't really thought about that until now. A lot of the accountability measures that are quantitative in here, it's easy because the state's monitoring them or somebody is.
There's already a form of data there.
But I can think about that in terms of what we can turn from qualitative to, and as Kim said, there are some things like she can list the total number of kids reached through Angel Tree and how that has escalated each year through United for Kids, or the number of kids who have been given instant help, as she just described, when a fire occurs or something else. So we can
And I think
start
that's
at
a
that.
powerful number at the end of the year to say, look, you as a community, because it only perpetuates the connection and the synergy between you as a community have reached 3,000 kids in our district because of the networks that we're building, and what's our target goal for that group, and those kinds of things that only build on one another once we kind of can quantify that a little bit more.
Okay, I will work on that. That's a good idea.
A similar thing to the Rise Mentoring. We have numbers about how many. We don't necessarily have a data set, and I toy with this in my mind as I'm reading through all of this, is that I don't want to create extra workload, but at the same time, what if those data that we would be collecting that say none of these people had experience with counseling or mentoring before, or 3 people mentored before, but this is how longitudinally those relationships have lasted.
Well, I don't know how much extensive this is, but I've seen Mandy at the end of the year do a survey with each of the mentors and mentees where they ask how the experience has been in different ways.
And we have a lot of that data, and I apologize for not including that in the update. So we have data that shows, how many mentors have been with the kid into the 4th year, into the 3rd year, et cetera. We have numbers and data, and that's something Mandy and I have toyed with a lot is when you're talking relationships, how do you measure? And looking at, how many discipline referrals have we reduced and things of that nature, that is very, very difficult to measure.
I don't know that we have the data there. The data is all available. It does take a little bit of extra. But to be able to, because essentially the thought process that I have I know this is a little bit outside of the realm of maybe I'm digging in and I don't mean to step on toes, but the more we can pull that kind of data, although you create a system for how you pull it, then you get grant funding that funds the program, that then allows extra staff to build the program so that it kind of, much like the United for Kids, it perpetuates itself so that we're not then spending extra dollars, because we all acknowledge that it's an awesome program. We don't have the budget to extend it. So how do we expand it with the data, with using what gains it's making on its own right?
No, I get it. And I think there's ways that we're just not, I haven't been really focused on.
We're just in the beginning of year 4. And so that's something that we actually last year talked about, in the spring when I sat down with Mandy, is where do we go from here? This has been a great experience so far and a great thing for our kids, and we want to continue that, just like you're saying. So how do we continue to build upon that? And we've actually looked at that kind of thing that you're talking about exactly, Crystal, with, how do we get additional funding outside of district funding? How do we get that, like you said, to get more personnel? Because we're getting to a point where we need another manpower to keep this sustainable and keep it growing the way it's going to keep growing, and
In
stuff.
the
So
face of
I
a budget
appreciate these
deficit.
comments because it's very helpful for us to look back and think on and figure out ways as a team to do that with Dr. Kelly and, with Mandy, myself. So.
And similarly with the new counselors that we brought on board. I know that each campus has individual needs. They're a lot different. But how do we quantify the help that they're providing? And what of that is educational tools for our teachers in the classroom? And what of that is duplication that we need to duplicate for other campuses? So it's hard because none of this is, like you said, with academically, it's already a set
Built-in
format
system,
that you just, but thinking outside kind of how are we meeting the needs? And then like we talked about earlier, how do we identify this problem? Because there seems to be this underlying tension of this emotional, mental health. Without a doubt, it seems to be an epidemic, not just for our district, but across our culture at large. And I firmly believe in meeting every student's needs, and that if we can meet their needs, then we can push them academically as well. So that's where my heart is coming from. I'm all on the edge of my seat, kind of passionate about this stuff, but
I like that, and I think I can start incorporating some of that in there. It won't be overnight, but I can do that.
So thank you for hearing my comments.
Okay.
Any other comments? We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, so this meeting is adjourned at 8:02.
They beat my
Thank
estimate,
you.
Carrie, by 13 minutes, just so you know.
Yes, Carrie.